Toasting in. Rich to Sisto on
Clink.
the show.
Clink, clink,
Clink.
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 Cheers.
Got yourself some Stella there.
Yes. Can I do an ad?
Yeah. Well, I've been doing product placements for Jameson since I started.
Look at you. Yeah. Nice. Hey, have you tried the Jameson Orange?
Oh, come on. Really?
Just asking.
A real whiskey drinker doesn't do that.
Okay.
Have you?
Yes.
And?
It's not like you think.
Okay. All right.
It's
So
not,
what is it?
It's not like drinking a Blue Moon and you've got an orange peel on the top of it.
Okay. You see, that's my issue is the citrus shit.
No.
I can't deal with that.
It's just a hint of orange. It gives it that's the best way to explain it. It just gives it enhances the bite. It just gives it a different kind of, it goes in a different direction. It's nice.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's nice.
Okay. So it doesn't soften it. It just gives it a little more.
No, in fact, it's not on the finish. It's on the beginning. Like you get it in the beginning and then the finish is.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's nothing like the finish, man. The finish is the way to go.
Well, Jameson will be very happy to hear you say that.
Yeah.
Because I've actually been shitting on it, and I now I apologize for it. So, wow, that's interesting.
Well, no more free booze for you.
Oh, no, I like I said, I apologize. Keep it coming.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm more of a vodka guy, but Jameson,
really,
yeah, Jameson. I started into the whiskeys a little bit. Like you're probably not going to like me after I tell you this. I'm more of a VO guy. So the Irish whiskeys have a different approach than the Canadian whiskeys. So the VO, for whatever reason, maybe it was because I was first introduced to whiskey with VO, and then Canadian Club, that whole thing. So, but VO, oh man, VO and ginger ale with a splash of cranberry juice and a lime. Do you ever have a Rocky Mountain motherfucker? You know what that is?
No.
I think it's VO, Crown Royal, a splash of cranberry juice, and a splash of lime.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's what a Rocky Mountain motherfucker.
So I mean, those are true cocktails.
Yeah.
What you're talking are true cocktails.
Yeah, you're like you like sipping your whiskey. I can see that. You like sipping.
Yeah. I'm a meat and potatoes drinker. Like I sip my whiskey.
Yeah.
I'm not a shot guy. I don't do shots.
Well, the VO is where it came from. It was doing shots of VO and a beer. So that would be all right. Line me up a shot of VO and give me a draft or a bottle, whatever was the.
Well, I mean, I would do okay. To be fair, I would do like a shot of Jameson on a show on a gig.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I would do a shot of Jameson and my Guinness.
So, there you go. Boy, that's like a dinner and dessert right there. Holy moly.
I mean, it was it's my lunch actually.
You got a Tullamore guy, just Jameson all the way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I tried that. I gave it. I gave it its fair shot, but there's something about the Jameson finish that just.
No, I hear you.
Seals the deal for me.
It is.
So,
it is nice. It is nice, but
I will admit that I'm myopic in my drinking. So don't take my advice in terms of cocktails.
Don't take my advice either. It's what we like, right? It's what we like.
It's what I like, and it keeps
I'm that way with beer. I'm a beer snob. I'm a Belgian ale guy.
I wanted to ask you about that because
IPAs. I've had enough.
Did you come to a point with IPAs where you're like
everything is IPA? It's funny. We go to the beer festival at Washington's Crossing every May, right? Yeah, and they should just call it IPA Fest, not a beer fest, because it's basically every beer that shows up there is an IPA. And there's nothing wrong with IPA, nothing wrong with them at all. And there's a vast variety of them, but there's too many of them,
right?
And it's just the hoppiness of it. I still am a big Victory fan. Their beers are really good. And I used to be a Hop Devil fan all the way, but then I got tired of it. Now it's Golden Monkey. Golden Monkey will fuck you up.
Yeah. It will.
Yeah.
I was an Imperial guy for a while. Like I would do the Sam Adams was doing it for a while.
Yeah. Sam Adams is good. They have good variety. They've got good stuff.
But the Imperial Ale, I think the one Imperial was 11% ABV.
Ooh.
It was brutal, and it was beautiful because it wasn't hoppy. It was,
right. Was it?
So
a sweetness to it? I haven't had their Imperial. Did it have a sweetness to it?
Yeah, there was a chocolate after burn.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's a little different. But then you like the Guinness too. I mean, Guinness is an acquired taste as well. That's got that. Obviously not a Belgian ale, but or an ale. It's more of a, what is it? It's a stout, right? So it's
a stout, yeah.
So
and it's really. I'm down to the only
rich flavor.
Yeah.
It's
the only beer I can do anymore. Because I was like you said, I was like the ultimate beer snob. Like it was like go out, and search for the latest and greatest, brew.
Yeah.
But I came home to the Guinness, and I don't drink beer that much, but when I do, it's Guinness.
That sounds like a commercial. I don't drink beer that much, but when I do,
I don't drink beer much, but when I do,
it's not those.
What's that meme? I'm the most interesting man in the world.
Yeah, the Dos Equis guy. Yeah,
the Dos Equis guy. Well, there you go. I'm the Guinness guy.
Boy, he had a gig, huh? Man,
I wouldn't mind landing that.
And then the way they put him off to the pasture. Remember when they killed his role? I mean, what did they do? Put him in a plane and he went to the moon or something? I don't even remember that. But it was something to that effect where Elon Musk put him in one of his rocket ships or Jeff Bezos rocket ships or something.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem with being part of a campaign.
Yeah.
There's a shelf life to your campaign, right? And then you're
yeah. I mean, look at AT&T. What's the actress's name that's been the spokesperson on TV for AT&T forever? Who's
that?
Oh, I can't remember her name, but it's not Flo. Flo is the Prudential. No, Flo is the insurance.
Flo.
Probably getting
She's still around. That's Progressive.
Progressive. I can't remember her name from AT&T, but she's been spokesperson for that forever. It depends. It depends on whether it's working or not.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a tough gig. It's great while it's happening.
Mm-hmm. Don't take it for granted.
Where you go,
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, here we are double fisting it with brew.
Well, you are. Yes, you are. You're making me look bad.
No, I just think it's the only thing keeping me alive right now in general. I can't do clear liquors. I can't do don't even get me near tequila.
Oh,
no, can't do it.
Yeah, I had a bad memory with tequila a while back. But haven't we all?
Tequila just made me argumentative. Like it wasn't like a fight thing. It just made me argumentative. I was like, the sky's not blue.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
You
start talking crazy. Yeah, no, it was it didn't get me in that regard. It was more of I thought I could handle more than I can. And it was bad. It was a bad scene.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it was back in the day when Cuervo was top shelf, right? Not anymore, but now every once in a while, Patron, depending on what it is and what I'm doing, I might, have that, but not like I did with the Cuervo Gold back in the 90s. Oh, yeah, that was a bad night.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, when I was a teenager, I got really, really sick on beer. I was still living at home. I was underage, and we were shooting beers. With the cans. You crack the bottom of the can, and then you suck it down.
Yeah.
So I was doing that with Colt 45 at 18 years old, and I was over at a friend's house or something. I came home for dinner. My mom and dad had dinner ready for us, and I was wasted. And my God, 2 bites of dinner, and everything was on the floor in the kitchen.
No way, right there.
Boom. Yeah. Yeah. It was bad. And I couldn't, the smell of beer just made me nauseous for so long after that.
Yeah.
Because that's,
Yeah.
that's all you smell. I mean, out of your nose, out of your mouth, everywhere,
Yeah.
so it's like, oh, I can't deal with beer. So it took a long time, but then I don't know what it was. I tried it again, and boy, there's nothing like a cold beer.
Especially the first one.
Yeah, like the one I'm having now. It's first one of the day.
Yeah, like the first one is the key.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think even after that, it gets old. Like for even when I was on the gigs, it's like I just wanted that first one. And my criteria, like when I was, even today when I'm on the road, it's a cold beer, and the bottle of Jameson is part of the rider. But that cold beer, and the Jameson stays with me I don't want to give the wrong impression that I take down the whole bottle in a night. No, it's the weekend. But that first cold beer, man, it's like,
no, it's I mean, the first 2 or 3 are pretty good too, depending on the beer, if it's what you enjoy, I mean, I'm a big fan of the Fin de Mont.
Okay.
That's I guess it's a Belgian style ale too.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. And that's got some potent behavior to it. We were
it's about 7.1.
Yeah, we went to Monk's in Center City a couple weeks back. I haven't been there in years. You ever go to Monk's?
No, I've never been there.
Great bar down near Rittenhouse Square.
Okay.
Lot of cool beers on tap, like just different. So if you want to explore, I don't know if they're craft beers or what, but they're from everywhere, all over the world. Good stuff. Yeah. But that's that. When I'm in a place like that, I'll expand my horizons a little bit, because you don't know what you're gonna get. And then if you go back, hopefully it's not a one-time deal where okay, the specials today are these 10 beers on draft because that's what we're pushing right now. And then you go back and it's another 10. Then you're like, oh man, I wish they still had that. But if it was something common that they serve and you like it, then of course that brings you back to that bar. And there's a lot of beers there that I haven't seen in any other place. So Monk's is a very cool place to find, eclectic and different styles of beer.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Really?
It's good to know.
Yeah.
But it was only one night.
It's all it takes is one night for me to go the other way. That's it. No more after that. Yeah. Yeah, but like anyway, I said, back then there was so much going on. Everybody was trying to find their lane, and not everybody was successful at it as fast as the next guy. And it was just interesting when you really look back at 65 to 70, 71. There was just, man, so much going on. And the changing of the sound of music, of rock, it was just morphing at light speed into something that, it's almost methodically, or not methodically, metaphorically, the way the scene in Back to the Future was created when Michael J. Fox's character started playing guitar at the dance, right? And then, and Chuck Berry's brother calls and says, "Hey, I got your sound. Here it is." I mean, that's like a metaphor of what was going on, in the mid to late 60s, with everybody just trying to find something that was their lane and something different that they could hang their hat on and say, okay, this is where we're going. I mean, you look at like the change from the 50s into the 60s, that doo-wop harmony sound kind of stuck around a little bit in the early 60s, but then it just went away, and the guitar kind of replaced that,
Yep.
But then the guitar got heavier, and then the production got different, and the guitar became front and center. And then all of a sudden we got Jimi Hendrix, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton, and all of a sudden you've got these super groups that kind of then spawned into individualism, and they all found their lane. And then the 70s happened, and wow, and then it didn't happen. And then the 80s gave us something totally different. And here we are, 40 years later. And music is still trying to find its way, which is the cool thing about it, and it just tries to weave and dodge and find a lane that works. And unfortunately, sometimes the industry dictates that push.
Right.
But it's just fun. It's fun to look back on that stuff, and it's interesting to kind of just daydream as to what was going on, what was the mindset, how were those collaborations working, was there chemistry, was it forced, and why didn't some of them work? Why did Blind Faith only last as short period of time as it did? Why did Cream only last as long as it did? Why did short of Jim Morrison passing away, would they have continued? How much longer? Just things like that. You kind of wonder, because you look back on it, and that music was just so good, so good.
Yeah, but that begs the question when you talk about bands like Cream and the Doors, how much was the label really influencing that? Because it seems to me that those cats were like pretty much on their own.
Yeah, those cats back then were creating their own path. There were no rules back then. They were creating the rules. I'm talking about now. Now, the industry, well, not just now, but within, the last 30 plus years, the industry kind of dictates a little bit, what's going to be what, based on, what's the next it factor, but back then they weren't worried about being it. They were worrying about being successful. They were worried about, jumping on that track and having that train pull them as far as they can go, and finding something, because it was a transition time, like we were saying, the doo-wop harmonies and the 60s, that whole vibe, that whole pop culture vibe of love and drugs and the Woodstock era and all that stuff was just kind of making the younger generation feel a little bit more empowered into their decision making and what they wanted out of life, and music was being written about that. Music was kind of a companion to all that, and more of a force back then than ever before, and ever since. There might be some songs today that kind of touch on the pop culture of the day, but back then everything was just I mean, look, you see what happened in Ohio at Kent State.
Right.
David Crosby and Neil Young immediately wrote a song, and they pulled, was it "Teach Your Children," which was going to be their next single, which was climbing up the charts. They pulled that song to put Ohio out because of that incident. So can we have that today? Will something like that is that possible today? Would that connection that quickly happen today? I mean, maybe if it's good enough, but you look at that song now, 50 plus years later, that song is as good now as it was then, in terms of the writing and the musicianship and the style, the hook, the melodies, because of the collaboration and the chemistry that those guys had.
Do you think today's writers are writing at that level? Just your personal.
I don't know. For me, I don't want to criticize too much, because it's easy to look back and have hindsight, and recognize how music was playing a role in a certain time.
Right.
When you're detached from it, when you have enough space in between, you can see it clearer. But when you're in the bubble, when you're living in that moment, it's hard to really, at least maybe for me, but maybe not so much for much smarter people and much more musically inclined people who are putting the music out, would probably differ in what I'm saying. But, I don't know if I was living in that era, at this time of my life in the late 60s, if I would have recognized it as much as I do now and appreciate it. But it's hard for me to look at music today and see if that is still an applicable, definition. There might be, there's probably some songs out there. Yeah. I can't find one off the top of my head that would resonate like Ohio did. But I'm sure there's plenty of songs out there that had intention of connecting the dots, but
do you think that that's part of the way music is consumed today? In other words, Ohio was a piece of music that was put out in a way of consumption that we all heard.
No, that's a really good point. The way the audience consumes music today, just on its face, is much different than ever before.
Okay.
which dictates how music is created, I believe, in some aspects of it. It might not be the whole reason why things are done the way they are, but yeah, there's a whole different, I mean, some bands today are talking about not doing albums anymore because, the time and money and energy that's spent in putting these songs together to make an album, most of those songs don't see the light of day in the industry, not so much from the fans' perspective. I mean, if you're a fan of a band, at least for me, I'm a vinyl collector. So for me, putting a record on the turntable and dropping the needle on that thing, even if I played the record so many times through the years, I'm still looking at that album. I'm still looking at the pictures. I'm still reading the liner notes or whatever piece of information is in that record sleeve, just to be like, wow, the romance of doing that and listening to it. For me, and I'm not saying I'm like anybody else, that's just how I like it.
And I hate to interrupt that because I want you to keep that train of thought.
Yeah.
But I wanted you to expound on that as a kid, because you and I are the same age.
Yeah.
As a kid, when we were growing up, we would get that record.
Oh gosh.
It's out of arm's reach. I've got my whole collection over there.
Yeah.
But you just said it. And that it really hit me, was there was an involvement. There was an active participation in listening to that music.
And it wasn't as mobile as it is now. I mean, look, I'm as guilty as the next guy. I've got my playlist, I've got my USB stick I plug in my car radio when I want to hear what I want to hear, and I put it on shuffle mode, and there they are. But there's also, for me, and this is not because I'm in radio, but there's also for me an excitement of having somebody else dictate the playlist. So listening to the radio is still something that I, for lack of a better word, get off on, because I don't know what's coming next. And if it's a format that I enjoy, then 9 out of 10 times I'm going to like what's going to be played next. And it's nice not to know what that next song is going to be. Now, granted, over time, you move on and you find another avenue to go down and listen to music. Like I said, my flash drive or CD player, or, your iPhone, or however you're listening to music. But in terms of how the bands are approaching things, as I mentioned before, they don't feel the need to do albums, which is unfortunate, because there's something about an album. There's something about, especially if bands take the time to order their songs a certain way or write songs a certain way, where they fit together, they interlock from track 1 to track 5 on side 1. Again, showing my age, sides don't matter anymore, but, just having that concept, it doesn't have to be a rock opera or a conceptual album, but the songs were written to have some connectability to them. And there's something about it, maybe that deep track isn't a hit, doesn't have the melody. But that song might have something to do with track 2 that was the hit, and you've got it's up to you, or not up to you, but maybe it encompasses you as the fan to use your imagination and try and figure out that connection. And that's the beauty of music, right? You listen to it and you try to figure out the approach and, the lyrics and the metaphors that are created from those lyrics and what that songwriter was creating. To that point, you listen to Robert Plant talk about some of the songs from Zeppelin back in the day when he wrote them. He doesn't feel the same attachment to those songs now than he did back then, because he's not at the same age. So all of the influences at his early 20s or whatever that influenced the lyrics that he created for those songs, they don't mean the same to him anymore. So he has a lot of trouble singing some of these songs because he can't put the same passion behind them as he did, when they were true to his lifestyle at the time. And I'm sure that's the same for a lot of bands. But, at this point, it's the fans want to hear that stuff, and I guess it's a double-edged sword when you're a musician that's been around for as many years as him, that, you have the right to sing and display any song you want. But at the same time, and I think he understands that, because he does kind of play different versions of Zeppelin songs now, depending on, the band that he's with. And, and some of the versions are less to be desired and some of them are done really well, but, it's a tough thing. But as a music lover and a music listener, my go-to is a vinyl record. And I'm still looking for, a copy of this or a copy of that. And I'm also still looking for, storage to put them in. I've got like 20 albums like stacked up next to each other, next to the storage bin that just, not the storage bin, but the shelving unit that I purchased and got to put them in, that I need to buy another thing. It's like that old George Carlin show, right? You need stuff for your stuff.
Yeah, you need stuff for your stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, getting not to digress too much here, but bands are looking maybe just to do singles, but that's where it started though, right? Back in the 60s.
Well, I was just going to say that. You just hit me,
I
man.
mean, how
That's
many Beatles
exactly.
songs and Stone songs were non-album singles?
Well, wasn't that the deal though? And
Yeah.
I'm asking you as the expert. Like, you had singles, and then that's what made the album, right?
Right. It was the chicken or the egg effect, right? Which came first, the
Right.
album or the single?
But
Yeah.
wasn't it Peter Grant that when Zeppelin started doing the records, they were like, Atlantic was like, well, we're going to single. And Peter Grant was like, oh, you're going to get the whole album. We're not going to do a single.
Perhaps.
And I could be wrong.
Yeah, I don't
be
know if it
wrong.
was him, but he could have been just, on that same wavelength that a lot of other bands were. And it's funny, the Beatles, as an example, because of the overseas, the dual prong approach that they had, America and the UK. And I think the Stones a little bit as well, they would release a single that would become an album track, but it would be on a different album in the UK than it was in the US, so
Oh, yeah.
that was kind of crazy. If it was on an album. And then there's songs that never made it to an album, but that ended up on a compilation, years down the road, which is, another path. But I don't have too much of a problem with bands just want to do songs, just be more frequent with it rather than, let's do one a year or whatever. I think that, I don't know what their game plans are, these bands that are saying that. I mean, there's a few that come to mind. Disturbed talked about doing that. Theory of a Dead Man talked about doing that. Godsmack has talked about doing that. And, they're in their right to go the path they want to go. But there's just something about an album, man. I don't know. I'm just old school.
I think it's like a picture. It's like a yearbook, like,
yeah,
in a way, it's like, when we were in high school or whatever, there was a year you remembered.
Yeah.
And, and when even when I went in and was doing records, everything was part of that collective. There was there was the grit, there was the smell, there was all of that was part of that album.
I don't know what smelled better, the vinyl or the tubes heating up with the dust collected on it when you turned on the old stereo.
You know what? I'm going to tell you right now. There's nothing better than the smell of tubes heating up.
Oh,
to this day.
It's amazing. Yeah.
The second only to the smell of Jameson. But I will say that tubes are actually,
Yeah. I have a 1959 Zenith radio record player, piece of furniture, console that I found at a consignment shop in Westchester, Pennsylvania, about 20 something years ago, for $50. It's in mint condition.
Really?
Yep. I just had to have the tubes replaced. At the time I was working at YSP in Philly. Station's no longer there, but the engineers there helped me order the right tubes and they put them in for me. And the thing works great. The only thing I have to get now is the needle. The needle on the turntable is shot. And I don't want I don't want to put any records on it because it's going to really destroy the vinyl.
I get the right stylus for that, man.
Yeah, I got to find it and hopefully I can. But the radio still works. The radio still works and the speakers are shot. The one speaker is not working very well, but outside of that, I mean, it's in pristine condition. It's that old pine, that real dense pine that they built those pieces of furniture with, and it's still in great condition. Even if it's just a conversation piece, having people over, open up the lid on the top and show them the radio on the turntable, and
No, you got to give them the whole experience.
Well, I got to get that stylus done. So once I get that done, I mean, a lot of people pull all the old shit out and they upgrade it. I don't want to do that. I want it to stay, as they say, stock. I don't want to start.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't want to start messing with unless I can't find it. If I can't find the part, then of course I'm gonna have to think about what I'm gonna do with it. But as long as I can keep it going, I'm gonna continue to play it. But that's just my my backup. I have a Technique 1200 turntable on my my go-to system, which to me is probably one of the best turntables that I've ever used. It's old school. I used to be a mobile DJ. I used to have two of those. They're great. It's not belt drive, it's direct drive. It's got the pitch control on it. It's got the weights, and it's got I think does it have 78 speed? I think it has a 78 speed setting on it. So 45, 33 and a half, or 33 and a third, and the 78 speed. If you got one of those older records, the real thick vinyl, which is now they're coming out with the 180, gram vinyls again, the big thick vinyl.
Yeah, I've seen those.
And I don't know if they sound better or not. I guess they do. I mean, I'm not that much of an audiophile to know one way or the other, but I just like finding the vintage vinyl, the original pressing if I can.
Yeah, if you
Something
can.
about that. I don't know. That's just me. Maybe I'm too much of a vinyl snob too with my beer. Who knows? I don't know.
Well, and that brings perfect segue, because it brings me to my next question. Was I remember as a kid, my father was in radio, and I remember as a kid the idea of like, I had the Fisher-Price record player. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember my dad going to work, and I knew what he did, so I used to, pretend like, oh, here's the latest. What was your drive to radio? Like, at what age were you like, I'm fucking doing that?
I was 10 years old. 10 years old. Yeah. I grew up in Central Jersey, but I'm originally from Yonkers, New York, which is in Westchester County, New York. And at 5 years old, we moved out of there and we moved to Central Jersey, an area where not only could we still get New York radio and television, this is pre-cable, right? But you could also get Philadelphia television and radio with an antenna.
No shit, really?
Yeah, so I was exposed to both cities of radio and television. Yeah. So 1976, 1977, 9 years old, big Yankees fan, grew up a Yankees fan. And my dad used to take us to games during those years, 76 through 79. We used to go all the time. And that's when you can afford to go to Yankee Stadium. I can name the entire team in 1977. So Reggie Jackson in right field, Mickey Rivers in center field, Lou Piniella in left field, Greg Nettles at third base, Bucky Dent at shortstop, Willie Randolph at second, Chris Chambliss at first, Thurman Munson catching, and then the pitchers, could run the gamut. But I was a huge Yankees fan. I'm a Yankees fan today too, but not so much involved in it than I was when I was a kid. When you're a kid, you just love your baseball players, and football was big in my world too. Big Giants fan. But hockey and basketball, not so much. So anyway, so Yankee games were a staple with my dad, whether we went or we watched them on TV. And being 9, 10, 11 years old, I couldn't stay up and watch the rest of the game. I had to go to bed. So here comes the transistor radio. As I listened to the games on the radio, I would fall asleep to the games with the radio still on in the morning. It would be a different radio show on 77 WABC out of New York. So at night, I'd be listening to the play-by-play. In the morning, it would be a morning show on a music radio station. And I would listen to this getting up to go to school or whatever it was. And I would be like, oh, this is different. And I, at first wouldn't think anything of it. But the more and more I would get up and be exposed to this, I started thinking, wow, this is pretty cool. Like these guys.
This was every day, right?
Whenever the night before there was a game, if there was a game on the weeknight, outside the weekends I was able to stay up and watch the game and maybe fall asleep on the couch or whatever. But
this was a regular thing.
This was a routine. Yeah. Watching Yankee games with my dad and my mom and dad was, and if my brothers were interested, was a routine. We would watch the games on Channel 11 all the time. And then, like I said, being that young age, I wasn't able to stay up. I wasn't allowed. I had curfew, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, whatever it was. So I would fall asleep listening to the games. And then the next morning I would hear this morning show. And I was just so interested that I wanted to know more about radio. I don't exactly know from that point what happened from that particular time period to when I met a guy named Steve Trevelise, who ended up being on YSP. He also is on WPST. He's on WIP now, and also on New Jersey 101.5. He does the night show over there. But he used to live near us, and he owned a mobile DJ company at the time. And go out and do parties, weddings, sweet 16s, bar mitzvahs, that kind of thing. So I got friendly with him, and I told him I was interested in radio. And again, at this point, I'm like 12, 13, 14, 15, getting a little bit older. and still had this in my head, like, wow, I want to know more about this. So him being on the radio, I immediately, was a magnet to him. Like, oh, he can show me the ropes here. He can tell me about it. So I started working for him. I started, being his roadie, if you will, loading the equipment for the dances and the parties and stuff. And then
wow.
then sitting with him during the parties, and just watching him and learning from him. And then eventually I ended up being a mobile DJ myself for his company. But he also would hire other radio disc jockeys in the area to host these parties. So if he was doing a party one night, he might have had 3 others the same night, and he had 3 other DJs that were working on some of the stations that he knew about that were out there. And sometimes I would go out with them and be their roadie. So I was networking. Who knew? So that was kind of how I developed not only my my skills from watching them, but also getting educated on the business and what to do and how to get my first job and that kind of thing. So that's kind of how it all materialized in the process of getting on the radio. And by 1987, 9 years after those nights listening to the Yankee games and falling asleep, I got my first job in radio doing overnights at PST in Trenton. And that was, 19 years old. All right. So you go to a wedding and there's a DJ hosting the wedding,
right.
MC, and they're playing music. I was that guy. You go to an office party, they're doing a graduation party. They're doing a sweet 16. They're doing a bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. And there's a DJ there, doing the limbo contest and doing this and doing that. That's who I was, so I had my turntables, my record crates, and my list of music that, the party that hired us wanted us to play. So that's what I was doing. And I was doing it not only by myself, but also sometimes I would go out with one of those DJs, the radio personalities of the area that Steve would hire. And one of those particular radio personalities was a guy named Tom Cunningham. Tom Cunningham was the program director of WPST at the time. And Tom and I are still very close. I shouldn't say close. We're friends. I guess we're close. He'd probably kick me in the back of the head if I took that back. Yeah, we're close. He's a great guy. Love Tom. And he is a huge factor in me getting my first gig because he hired me. Because of the relationship I built with him, because of what he saw in me, he gave me a shot. And, back then, up until I guess about maybe 10 years ago, the overnights was the place for a radio DJ to land their first opportunity to grow. The old saying is, oh, you want to start in the mailroom, when you're trying to get into a company. That was basically the mailroom, either the overnight shift or maybe you went out with the promotions crew to set up, an appearance somewhere, giving out T-shirts to the crowd or to the audience that was coming by. Maybe it was at a job fair or a college fair or something like that. And, oh, you're from the radio station. Can I have a T-shirt and a pen? That kind of thing. That's how you kind of get your start. But, for me, lucky enough, I was able to get on the air and I did the overnight show full time, Monday through Friday, at 19 years old. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Now, mind you, I also went to broadcasting school. So I did have that, in my arsenal, before getting the job. And that's something I had to do because I had to understand, the technology at the time of what the equipment I was going to be working on. I mean, it's one thing to want to be on the radio and maybe you knew what to say when you opened the mic, but you also needed to work the equipment, right? I mean, you're not going to be a guitar player in a band if you didn't know how to play guitar, right? It's not going to work. So I had to figure out, how to work the radio equipment, and broadcasting school helped me out with that. Now I could have went to a college. I did actually go to college for a year and a half, but I stopped going to college because I got the job. I said, you know what? I'm going to school for my communications degree. I just got hired in radio. Wait a minute. This doesn't make any sense. Why am I still going to college? So I decided to drop out of college, and it's been 36 years since. And here I am. Yeah.
And that was, okay. So that's 87.
87. Yep.
Yep. That's awesome. So you're jumping in to the deep end.
Yeah. Right away. Right away.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did that for a few years, and then I went to a different station. I went to Wildwood, New Jersey, which ended up being 8 years of the best time of my life.
Really?
Oh, and that's where the tequila story is.
Oh, come on. You got to share.
Yeah, no, Wildwood. Yeah, that was something. Living at the beach, I did afternoons. No, what did I do? I did nights for a little
What
while.
year was this? What year is this? Because we might have crossed paths and not known it.
1989. So 2 years at PST, and then I went to Wildwood in '89, and that's when I moved out of my house. So that's where where all the fun began. So I moved to Wildwood and stayed there till 97. Yeah, 97.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah. I was on a rock station that had just launched the same year I got into radio, 87. So I was there, 2 years into its start. And so it was growing. I was growing in a new area. So I was learning the area, learning the community, learning the people, learning, the language of the beach, and the food of the beach. I was never really a big seafood eater, but I'll tell you what, man, it changed my life. Wildwood just changed my life. There was so much about that. And again,
really?
When you're in it, like we were talking about before with music, in your lifestyle, wherever you are at the time, you take so many things for granted, right? You don't really appreciate some of the things because you're always looking for what's next, right? You're always looking to grow, right? Nothing wrong with that, but keep it in check. And I learned that valuable lesson. But man, those days in Wildwood, I couldn't wait to get out because I knew that I could do much more if I was out of Wildwood. Like I knew I needed to branch out. But boy, when I look back on it, I wish I was still there. There's just something.
Really?
There's something about that whole experience that I look back on, especially from 92 to 97.
Do you think it's part of,
and also just, where I was in my life, 25, 24, 23 years old.
Do you think that's part of your core? And I apologize for interrupting, but
good.
That struck me because as a musician,
yeah,
that's where I found my voice.
In Wildwood?
No. No. But my question, so do you think that there's a correlation between a point in your development as an artist because of what you do, right? Because you're an artist.
Yeah.
That you find a voice that no matter where you go from, no matter where you grow from, and it's an improvement, it's this, it's that, but there's still this, there's that core. And you just said something that hit me. You were like, man, to go back to that, because maybe that was the root of your voice. That, if anyone was, for you to go back and say, that's my core, like a mission statement, right?
Yeah.
I ran a music school, so I have to have mission statements.
Mm-hmm.
And the mission statement is always something you come back to when you go off course.
Yeah, you find your center, your foundation.
So is that what you're saying? Is that was your foundation started there?
Perhaps, because I made a lot of mistakes, and you can't grow, you can't be successful without failure. And I made a lot of mistakes there. But I also made a lot of strides too. There was a lot of things that happened to me in my career during those 9 years in Wildwood. One of which is not only was I working in Wildwood at the time, but I also ended up working weekends in New York radio as well in 1994.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I started working at Q104.3 in New York City when it turned into an active rock station. It was a classical station. The signal was a classical station. And then in December of 93, it switched to pure rock is what they called it, basically hard rock. And 4 or 5 months into it, I ended up getting the last overnight weekend shift there. So I was working 7 days a week in radio for 2 years, actually longer than that, for 4 years, because after that stopped, I ended up at YSP in Philly on the weekends. So it was just jumping from the fire to the firing pan, but still doing my full-time on-air shift and music director, assistant program director position at WZXL Monday through Friday. So, it was me saying, I don't care that I'm working 7 days a week, because I didn't feel like it was working. The work part was traveling from one station to the other, but being on the air, as I'm sure you feel the same when you're on stage, there's a certain adrenaline.
It's not a job, man. Just doing your thing.
It's like, wow, I'm doing something I love, and they're paying me for it. So I'll do more. I'll do more. Did I not have a social life? Oh, I had a social life, because let me add to the equation. I was also DJing at one of the rock bars on Friday nights and sometimes Thursday nights on top of it all. So
even with your schedule,
yes,
you were still going out and doing that.
Yeah, I would. I'd get off the air 3 o'clock on a Friday, and then spend the next couple of hours in the office doing the other stuff on my other responsibilities. Go home, take a nap, be at the bar by 8 o'clock, and it was open until 5 back then. Those bars were open until 5. So I was the entertainment. Well. Yeah, I was the entertainment in between the band sets. So there was 3 or 4 band sets, and by 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, the bands were done, but the bar wanted to stay open to continue to make money. And I remember a couple of times. This was the Playpen. I don't know if you remember the Playpen on the block that rocks. Yeah. So the manager would come down, and walk around and get check the registers of all the bartenders. And there was like 3 or 4 bars in there. Here I am in the DJ booth. There's nobody in the bar except maybe the bartender's girlfriend sitting at the bar waiting for them to go home. And I'm looking at the bar manager and I'm like throwing my arms up. I'm like, last call. Like, nope. Looks at his watch, goes, not yet. I'm like, dude, it's 4 o'clock. Nobody here. Like, come on. I mean, whether I left at 4 or left at 5, I was still getting the same pay. But I just felt at that point, how much more money are you going to make? No, but those guys were great. That owned that managed those bars. I guess they were co-owners. They were really great people, and I still keep in touch with them on social media. But they were very good friends of the radio station as well. So it was a good relationship all in all. But it was just some funny moments where like, come on, man, it's time to go home. And plus I've been up since 8 o'clock earlier that day. So
doing your gig, doing the other
and then Saturday would come along and I'd have to recharge and and you talk about the job part of it, driving to the station. So here was my schedule. Actually, there was a time where this was when I wasn't doing the Friday night bar yet, but I was doing Saturday morning at 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. on Q in New York City. So I would drive Friday night at 9 o'clock. I would leave my apartment to drive to the Atlantic City bus station, and I would park in Trump Plaza Hotel parking garage. And this is when the Atlantic City bus station was where the outlet stores are now, because now they moved it. When they put the outlets in, they moved it down the street. But it used to be right there in the center. As soon as you came into Atlantic City, the bus station was right there. So it was an easy walk from Trump Plaza, which is also no longer there. So I would park in the garage there, and then I would walk to the bus station, and I would get a midnight bus out of Atlantic City to take me to Manhattan. It would take 3 hours. I'd sleep on the bus, get there at 3 a.m., either get a taxi or walk from Port Authority to 46th and 6th, which is where the station was, and then sleep on the couch, have the overnight guy wake me up at 5:30 to do 6 to 10. Then I would get out. I would leave that radio station, get to Port Authority by 10:30 to get the 10:45 bus back to Atlantic City to get in my car and drive back to Wildwood to do 2 to 6.
Children, I'm interrupting this broadcast to tell you that's what it takes.
Yes.
Children, that's what it takes. Yeah. Continue. I'm blown away by this.
I was on cloud 9 because when they hired me in New York, it was Mother's Day, 1994. I was walking around Bryant Park in shock, like just big glow smile on my face, just looking around, seeing the Empire State Building. Just like, oh my God, I just got hired to do radio in New York City, the #1 market in the world.
Wow.
Holy
moly. No, that too, that's huge.
And that's 7 years after I got my first radio job. So 9 years after I wanted to be on the radio, I got my first radio job. 7 years after getting that radio job, I made it to New York. 2 years, it was only 2 years, but the station went, they changed format. That wasn't my fault. And then I went to Philly right from there without even a hitch. June 30th was my last shift in New York. 4th of July weekend was my first shift in Philly on YSP in 1996. In 96. Yeah. And then that lasted a year and a half, because then I left and went to West Virginia to program my first radio station in 97.
Okay.
And then I came back to YSP when I got back from that. Yeah.
How long were you in West Virginia?
Exactly a year to the day. Yeah.
So
it was an interesting year.
It's West Virginia. Of course, it's going to be interesting.
Well,
And I love West Virginia.
No, what I paused because I didn't realize the culture shock on its face that I was going to experience. I mean, think about it. I was living in Wildwood, New Jersey for 8 years, right? There's not a beach within 9-hour drive of West Virginia. So here I am with my beach chair, right? My cooler and my radio. And I'm in the middle of, what's the name of the park in the middle of town there in Huntington? I can't think of the name of the park.
You should know. You
Ritter
live
Park.
there.
Ritter Park. Here I am in the middle of Ritter Park in June of 1997 in my beach chair with my cooler and my radio. And of course the cooler was filled with beer. And I'm the only one doing what I'm doing, just sitting in the sun, like maybe reading a paper or whatever, reading a magazine or whatever. And I'm looking around, I'm saying to myself, wait a minute, where the hell am I? I'm a fish out of water here, you know?
Hey, son, here in West Virginia, man.
Yeah. And then another funny part of that summer is, and this is when I really realized that I don't belong there. And again, I love West Virginia. It's a beautiful state. Not, there are no hard feelings with West Virginia. It was a great moment in my career, and I would never change a thing about it. Because again, it was a year that a lot of things happened for the good for me in my career. But 4th of July weekend, again, foundation, right? Just came back from living at the beach in Wildwood for 9 years, and here I am in West Virginia. One of the stations in our cluster was a country station. One of 25,000 that are on the dial in West Virginia, and Billy Ray Cyrus concert they were hosting, free concert across the Ohio River there in Huntington, West Virginia. So
Huntington.
So one of the requirements of all staff was to be all hands on deck for this event. So I chose, all right, I'll be a security guard, whatever. I'll help seat people or whatever. Well, that security guard responsibility extended to being Billy Ray Cyrus's bodyguard, so to speak, as he did the fence walk to all his fans trying to get an autograph. So here are all these screaming fans to Billy Ray Cyrus. This is 1997. So I guess Miley was just, born or maybe 2 years old at the time. I don't know. I don't even know.
Around that.
Yeah, so it wasn't she wasn't Hannah Montana yet. This is pre that. Nope. And all these screaming girls are wanting, achy breaky heart, ponytail, what do you call it? Mullet dude, his
mullet, man.
And I'm pushing all these girls, all right, hold on, he'll get to you. And as I'm doing that, I'm saying to myself, why am I not on the beach watching the fireworks? Why am I doing this? So it's like, oh man, I'm homesick. I am homesick. So, I tried from that point. Yeah, I tried from that point to make it work, and it just wasn't happening. And there's some other political things going on, but I ended up coming back to YSP that February, which was almost I think it was a year to the day that I moved out there, February 18th. Came back and started working at YSP, and then I stayed at YSP until 2008.
Wow. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So long stretch there.
Yeah, it's a good stretch.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, the West Virginia thing was good. It was the first programming job of my career. And it was a rebuild of the radio station because at the time they were switching it from simulcasting their classic rock station in the different market there. So they wanted to take it a little bit more harder edge. So I had the experience with ZXL and YSP at the time and Q104 to be able to do that. And of course, It was college town. Marshall University's right there. I saw Chad Pennington throw the football to Randy Moss many, many, many times. They were the stars of the Thundering Herd during that time. Okay. And then all of a sudden, this band came out of nowhere called Creed. And that was a pretty remarkable moment because we brought Creed into Huntington for a low-dose show, as they call it, before, right as My Own Prison hit. It was a huge, huge hit in December of 1997. And we brought him into Huntington for, I don't know, what did we pay for him? $1,000. And we ended up charging $1 to get into the place, which you could.
No shit.
It could only fit 1,000 people, but we fit like 1,600 people in there. And there was about 1,000 people around the corner wanting to get in.
Wow.
Well, it was a moment for me as a program director, station manager, to pull off something like that. And for Huntington, that's probably hopeful. I don't know if people are still talking about it, but it was a big deal you know, to
So,
have that band there.
if you don't mind explaining what that means to the listeners and the watchers, is a program director versus like, so, you know, we know what you do on the air.
Yeah.
But
So a
now,
program director is the manager of the radio station. So he or she is responsible for the everyday operations of the radio station, from everything. Everything outside of sales. The sales department has their own management structure, but they work hand in hand. You know, hopefully you get good chemistry between the two departments, because it's very important for both departments to work seamlessly to be successful. There's a lot of radio stations where that isn't the case. And it's, chemistry at its start is, on its face is hard. As you know, as a musician, it's not an easy thing to find. And sometimes you work on it and you can get there, but sometimes you can't.
right.
But program director is the station manager, is somebody who, is responsible for every show, morning show, midday show, afternoon show, night show, the promotion
throughout the clock.
The radio station does round the clock, everything. If the station goes off the air, they're the ones that has to do something to make it go back on the air, get in touch with the engineering department. If there is somebody that calls out sick, they've got to find a replacement with one of their part-timers, or they go in and they cover the shift. Now it's a little different because there's voice tracking. Some things are pre-recorded, so you can get away with things a little bit more easily in that regard today. But back then, not so much. And they're just involved with the everyday operation of the radio station, just like a store manager would be for a store, or a restaurant manager would be for a restaurant. Really, there's not much different. It's just a different industry. And sometimes the program director is also on the air, so they are one of the air talent personalities, and that was the case for me in West Virginia. I did the afternoon show. So yeah, it's the boss pretty much. But having that on your mantle as the boss, of being able to be part of creating an event like that for the community. Looking back on it, that was a moment that I knew at the time that I did not take for granted. That was a moment where I knew that this was something special, and I really embraced it, and I absorbed it, and I ate it up. I wish I had audio. I wish I had video of the evening, of not just, the crowd inside, the crowd outside waiting in line, but also the stage announcements, for me to go up on stage and to welcome everybody to the show. And, the response that we received, it was just a proud moment, and I knew at the time how special it was. But in the rare moments, that you don't take something for granted. And I'm glad I had the mindset at the time to embrace it and to realize that. But even looking back on it, it's just as powerful as it was the night it happened. It's a very, very, a cool, moment in my career, proud moment in my career. But yeah, so, again, it's perspective, because for me, it was proud. Maybe for somebody else, it wasn't, maybe for the person who didn't get in, they were the last one before they closed the doors. They're looking at it as the worst night of their life, because they missed going to see Creed for $1 by that much. Yeah. Yeah. So, who knows? But
so
and then of course the band blew up, and it made that night even more spectacular. It's like, oh wow, remember we knew them when,
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's like when Nirvana played Dobbs in Philly. You're
right.
like, who's that? Who are those guys?
Yep.
Then,
It's just to be a part of that.
6 months later, like, oh shit.
And if you were there, fly on the wall, a fan of the bartender, you look at that like, wow, I was at the beginning of something special.
So when did you ever feel, or when was it that you felt on the air? I'm talking going back to on the air.
What do you mean?
That you had, like, with on the air DJing. I know that, that's a weird word to use for.
But you're
broadcasting.
You're saying it in a past tense kind of.
No. I'm saying that as you went through your career, at what point were you on the air that you said, I found my voice? This is who I am.
I think in Wildwood. Yeah, I think in Wildwood.
That was when it was?
Yeah. There was a lot of things that were being created to build that personality. Nicknames and different things, and but I think I found my stride in Wildwood in a lot of ways. Being consistently on the air helps. And, when I went down there, that was the whole reason for going there, is because I wanted to get off the overnights. The overnight was just for me. Okay. I'm learning, right? I'm making some of the early mistakes, and I'm on the radio. I accomplished that. Now I really want to be a personality. I want to be part of the community. I want to be on the air during a time period where it matters. The overnight, it's a whole different group of people listening then. And they're there working to have you be there as their companion to get them through the night. So it's not really something where, you're not going to do a live broadcast at an overnight shift somewhere. You're not going to, do any of that stuff. You're not going to shake hands, kiss babies and pat backs for the overnight shift. So I knew that I needed to expand. And the only way to do that at the time, because there was no room for me going anywhere else at the station at the time. And, at 2 years into it, the overnight shift can be a pain in the ass. It's not an easy shift, even at that young age. So I wanted to be on the air in a good time slot. I didn't care if it was middays, afternoons, or nights. Mornings, not so much, because mornings is a different animal. You've got to be a different level of personality to do a morning show. And I knew that wasn't my skill set. So finding this job in Wildwood, doing nights, it was the opportunity for me to do that. And then I also understood that okay, I plan on being here for a while. I'm going to plant my feet and grow some roots and really get into the community and really, make this become my home. And it really did become my home. So much so that I've never lived anywhere. And to this day, I can still walk into a bar, and if the bartender's the same guy that's been there for all these years, will know who I am and say, "Hey, what's going on?" There were so many bars in the Wildwood, Cape May County, Atlantic County area, because we did so many things with the radio station with them, or just me going out and seeing bands or hanging out on wing night or Monday Night Football or whatever it was back then, that I became friendly with, the crowds at the bars. And to be able to walk into a place and people know who you are. I mean, granted, yes, the radio helped because, I hate using the word, but there was a level of celebrity attached to it. But
Sure.
not everybody knew my face. They knew my voice, right? So, but those that knew my face was because of the relationships that I built outside of being on the radio, which is so important. So, that's a testament to what people say about a successful radio station is being involved in the community and people knowing who you are and doing good things for them. There were so many events that we did, so many charity events that we did, to help clean the ocean with Clean Ocean Action. And we did things for March of Dimes, so many different things that we did through the years there that I was a part of, that I really felt like not only being on the air, I was finding my groove, but again, not to sound like a broken record, but being part of that community, being out at the bars as a, a patron, but also as another DJ, where people were like, "Oh, wait a minute, that's the guy on the radio. Oh, wait a minute, that was the guy at wing night the other night, or that was the guy that was on Monday Night Football." Like, I continuously was able to, thread the needle, so to speak, and cross into those different areas, which is what you're supposed to do when you're a celebrity or a personality, in a community. You need to do that. It's almost like being a politician. You got to campaign, because that helps you what you do on the radio. It helps your audience, build your audience and gain that popularity, and it's gotta be authentic too. You can't be, can't be Clark Kent and then Superman on the radio. You got to be the same guy. You can't be two different people, because people are going to pick up on that. So I had all that going on, and I knew how important it was, and I enjoyed it so much. And of course, I was living at the beach, so it was just all happening. The only thing that wasn't happening is I wasn't making any money, and I think that was the driving force of wanting to get out of that area, because there wasn't enough money to be made, and I knew at the time that there was more money to be made. But as I found out through those years that, my income was here, and then the income I wanted was here, which was doable. But as I was growing to get to that point, the income levels started to dip as well in radio. So I got to the point where I was on the same page, but I certainly wanted the same page to be up here,
right
down here.
Yeah.
And then things just kind of, leveled out, and I guess depending on where you are, got worse. But radio isn't as a lucrative career as it used to be. mainly because of everything else that's going on with the way people consume music. If you're talking about a music station, talk radio and sports radio right now is on fire. Talk radio, depending on what political persuasion you follow, is big. But when all said and done, if I could at this point in my career go back to those Wildwood days,
it sounds like a Bryan Adams song. I'm sorry.
Well, it's Bobby Rydell, right? Did he do Wildwood Days or On the Way to Cape May? One of those two. Yeah.
On the way to he was on the way to Cape May.
It was On the Way to Cape May. Yeah.
Which was my vacation spot for.
Okay. Well, I still go down there. I mean, like I said, I can walk into the Ugly Mug, and I think.
Oh my God, I love that place.
Yeah, bartender from the old Wildwood days, the old block that rocks. I think Greg. I think his name is.
Yeah.
I think he still works there, and I'll walk in there, and he'll be like, "Hey, what's going on?" And I haven't lived in Wildwood since 1997. You know what I mean? I haven't lived there since 1997.
Man,
and this guy,
a lifetime ago,
he knows who I am. I mean. It's like, why did I leave? Like, what did I do?
Well, I always thought that Cape May and that county, that including Wildwood, time stands still there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Victorian aspect of Cape May will live forever. But Wildwood's changing. I mean, the crest is changing. I guess a little bit of Wildwood. Those hotels, all those, those vintage hotels are being sold.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a lot of them going under now. I don't know. For a while there, they were turning them into condos, especially the ones that were along the beach that were selling. And I don't know if that's the plan with the ones that are for sale now, or they're just going to knock them down and build, new townhouses or whatever on the land there. But beachfront property. The townhouse I was renting in Anglesey, which is the section in North Wildwood. At the time, before I went to West Virginia, the landlord was selling it for $69,000. Now, this was a 2-floor townhouse. Yes. If I would have known then that all I needed was 10%, I would never have left. I would still own that piece of property.
Yeah, I bet you would. And you'd be making a killing.
Worth millions. Yeah. So, again, you live and you learn. That's one thing.
You don't know. You don't know at that time.
You don't know. But I wish somebody would have told me, because I definitely would have said, hey, Dad, give me 10% of $70,000 because I want to buy this townhouse. I'll pay you back. Trust me. I'll pay you back.
Yeah, I'll pay you back a lot.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Yeah. But, it is what it is. It's a good memory. It's a good story to tell. And, we all have those moments, what shoulda, coulda, right? But you make decisions at moments in time for reasons, and crossroads, are presented to you, and you hope that the decisions that you make are going to be fruitful and plentiful. And for the most part, they were. I'm not saying it was wrong for me to leave. It had to happen for me to be where I am now. But that being said, to be able to go back there again, going back there now, it's nothing like it was. So it wouldn't be the same thing. It would be nothing like it was. So
I like what you said there. I like what you said there, because I think that resonates deeply with the idea of, the artistic growth is you can't go home again.
No, you can't.
And I know it's a shitty thing to hear. I mean, I think ultimately we'd like to hear that, to be able to go, hey, we can go home again, but we can't. I've experienced it in my life in touring and teaching and schooling. You can't go home again.
Yeah.
Things move on. Like there's an undercurrent of life that moves on from where we may have staked our claim initially. You found yourself in Wildwood.
Yeah.
And you moved on and you grew from that. But to come back to that's a whole different world now.
Well, because of what it is now. If it was the same clubs, same environment, same people, crowd that I hung with back then that were still there, which, they moved on too, then it would be, but it won't be. It would be rebuilding what was, and then comparing whether or not it's still as good. And it wouldn't be just as good. It wouldn't be. Because you've got this picture in your mind as to what you want it to go, what you want to go back to it, and what you want it to be. And it's just not going to be there. I mean, there is that old saying too, right? where you have to. I'm going to butcher it, but you have to leave to be able to come back, or something to that effect. Like you have to, I don't know how exactly it's said, but I used to remember what it was, because that was the driving force for me to actually leave in the first place. Because you think about a musician or a baseball player, football player, a professional athlete, and a radio personality. For the most part, you've got to be willing to go, right? I mean, you're on tour.
Right.
You got to be willing to, obviously you have a home base, but you're living out, 6 months, 8 months out of the year, out of a suitcase, as a musician. But as an athlete, maybe you're getting traded. Your family's still probably planted somewhere with the house, but you're living out of a suitcase. You're living, maybe with a roommate from somebody on the team with you, and but it's not your home. You might be on that team for 5 years, 6 years. But off season, you go back to where your home base is. As a radio personality, not so much now, because the reciprocation of the investment isn't there from a company. But you used to say, all right, I've got to go. And that's why I went to West Virginia. You got to go where the job is to be able to plant your flag and build and to make a name for yourself. You still kind of have to do that. But I was lucky enough in my career, still today, that, I didn't have to leave the nest that much. I did it just that one time, in West Virginia. My career has focused around the Jersey Shore, Philadelphia, New York City for the most part, and Delaware. So I can get in my car and drive, right? Hour and a half, whatever. And I was fortunate to be able to do that and stay close to home, within relative distance. But a lot of people had to go. A lot of people had to go to East, wherever, to make a name for themselves, and maybe stayed there, and didn't come back home, for whatever reason. So I consider myself, lucky in that regard. But when I knew I had to go to West Virginia, if I wanted to be a program director, I knew I had to leave the station I was at, because the guy who was the program director, who is still there as the program director and a good friend of mine, I knew that it wasn't going to happen there. So if I wanted that on my resume, I had to go, and that was the opportunity was knocking at that point. So it's like, well, you got to leave to be able to come back, or something to that effect. And that's what happened. I left and I came back. And when I came back, it catapulted my career, in a different direction, being in Philly for those 10 years, and then back at the Jersey Shore, and then back in Philly again. And, now I'm in New Jersey, doing some shows in New Jersey, working for a company for their Jersey station. So, it's been a fortunate path, to say the least, compared to some other people in the business, in terms of having to leave.
And I agree with that. I think it's important, to go out and come back.
Yeah,
I think that's a big thing. And speaking of Philly, that's where you and I met.
Yeah,
we met in Philly, and I remember there was a Philly 500 show that you and I had to bring in together.
Yeah, how long ago was this? This was what?
Oh man,
6 years ago?
Yeah, no,
6 or 7 years ago.
It was before. It was before the pandemic.
Oh well, yeah, it was well before
2000. I was. Yeah. You know what it was?
I think it was 2016.
No. It was after that, because I didn't get the gig with MGK until 2017.
Okay.
But it was when they had us upstairs in the makeshift.
Yeah,
studio.
The makeshift studio, right? Because we were getting all that construction done. Yeah.
And you know what? I got to tell you, it was a great thing for me.
All right. So when you're talking about MGK.
Yeah. That's where we met. And I think it was a Philly 500 show. So we were up in that transitional studio.
Yeah, because we were having that construction done. So we were up on the where were we, on the 5th floor or 6th floor or something? Like we were at the 4th floor for forever, and then the construction started, and they moved us up to this makeshift studio,
which was initially like a conference room.
Yeah.
And it's the magic of and the magic of Tony was able to configure this place into like a broadcast studio.
Yeah.
And the thing that I found fascinating about it was my first experience, and we talked about this earlier, was downstairs, the original studios.
Yeah.
So what Nancy had me do was when she brought me into MGK, I recorded shows. Like I did pre-recorded. I think I did three.
You did like test shows, right? Little test shows.
Test shows, yeah. And that was part of the deal. Like, let's see if we, let's see if we can pull this off. Because I mean, Nancy also, she was the one who kind of discovered Bam, Jackie Bam, right? Jackie Bam, Jackie, right?
I don't know. Jackie and I actually worked together at YSP. Jackie was at YSP. Well, I'm trying to think because Nancy was at YSP as well, but maybe she was there the same time. Maybe it was her. Yeah, that could be true because she was at YSP before she was at MGK. But I'm trying to think of the time period whether Jackie Bam Bam had started there yet, only because, you're talking about MGK being in a different studio. I'm not sure what year it was, but YSP moved from 5th and Market in Philadelphia, right near the Liberty Bell Independence Mall, to the building right behind them because the building was sold. Channel 3 was in the same building at the time, and they were moving out over to Spring Garden where they are now. And then that building was being sold and then torn down. They built a new building for the Jewish Museum. The National Jewish Museum is there now. But YSP moved to the building behind it, which was right across the street from Fox. So it was at 4th and Market. But Nancy wasn't there at the time for that transition. She had already left and went to MGK. And that's when I remember Jackie being on YSP and the new studios there. So I don't know whether or not Jackie, I just don't remember whether he was part of YSP when Nancy was still there. But, I could be wrong, but I digress.
No, I'm only saying that from the standpoint that the way I came into it was not, a traditional way.
To compare it to how I started, it's not that far from that. I mean, you went in there and you did some test shows. I went in and did, and add this to the story, but I went in and did a weekend shift, an overnight shift on the weekend, just to kind of, get my legs a little bit and see if they liked me before they gave me the full-time overnight shift. So, in a way, it was the same thing. You just recorded your test shows. I did mine on an off night where nobody was really listening, so couldn't get in trouble. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't really that non-traditional, to be honest with you. If you think about it, you just did it in a different way.
Well, it's interesting because it goes back to like when my father got into radio. He went to, I wish I could remember the station. I can't though.
Philadelphia?
Yeah, it was in Philly.
Yeah.
And he went in and he was just looking for a job. And they were like, well, we don't have any job openings, but we need a janitor. So he's like, I'll take it.
Yeah.
So he took the gig, right? So he takes this gig as a janitor. And he's doing the groundwork. He's doing all this stuff. Mm-hmm. But he was going in on, he would go in and practice in Studio B, And then one day, the afternoon guy goes out for a lunch break and gets hammered.
Oh.
And he comes back to the radio station. He can't function. So my dad's out there cutting the grass, doing the groundwork.
Yeah, yeah.
And the program director goes, Jimmy, you're on in 10.
Wow.
So my dad shuts off the lawnmower, runs in, and he does the show.
Wow.
Hired full time after that.
See?
Yep.
Now, you can't say that was the traditional way to start.
No. And that was kind of the weird thing with me, like when Nancy, after that situation, and we talked about it earlier today, like when I went in and did the spot.
Yeah.
And then she called me later. She's like, would you be interested in this? And, I did it more for Dad than I did it for anyone else. I was like, okay. So I did the test run and they aired it. And she comes to me and she goes, let's do this thing. Mm-hmm. And so I did 2 more recorded shows. Mm-hmm. And then she goes, you got to go live. Now, here's the shit no one knows. I'm going to share this now. There's
breaking
some shit
news.
that breaking news. There's some shit that some people don't know about. So this is back when I was 350 pounds, just bulking, I was. So she goes, "You're the Viking. Go on as the Viking."
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. But I was terrified of going live. I was like, I don't know anything. She had me ghost Andre, who was the most amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, just
so you sat and you watched and you learned how to run the board.
I'll tell you a funny Andre story. Yeah. Fucking Andre, right? And I'm sure you know this too. So and this is before we moved upstairs to the makeshift, right? But we knew that was happening, right? Or the station knew it was happening. So I'm in the main room, right? And Andre's just so gracious and so nice to me. And and honestly, Andre knew me as a different person because Andre knew me as the guitar player in the Mad Trio. And he was a judge at the show that we won.
Right. So your band was part of the MGK house band competition.
Yeah, and we were like this rare situation.
Did you guys win? I don't remember. Did you win?
Fuck yeah, we were the shit. Like we came in, we were the underdogs. No one knew who the fuck we were.
Yeah,
we come in and we just, And I remember Andre came to me at one point. And he goes, "You guys aren't a bar band. You're a fucking arena act." He's like, "I haven't felt that way since since seeing Cream when I was a kid."
Wow.
Oh yeah. Like, I mean, I will never purport myself as a radio guy, but I'm not going to argue with anybody about what I can do on a stage. Like, that's what I do. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's your forte.
And, Andre was so gracious about it. So here I am having to kind of shadow him. And there's this one day I come in, it's afternoon, it's obviously the afternoon shift, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, "Okay, dude, take over the board." and he moves the mic over to his side. And then he's like, "I'll be right back." He takes off. Commercials running.
Yeah.
And I'm watching Zeta. And I'm like, this commercial's about to end. Where's Andre?
Yeah.
And I'm preparing to do whatever. Like I got my hand on the mic and I'm like, and he's got me on manual.
Oh, okay. So for those that don't know,
thank you.
The radio automation system, which is called Zeta at the time, was playing the commercials, which they would fire off on their own one after the other. But when the last one played, because it was in manual mode, that means the DJ or the air personality at this point was Chris, had to react and do something. And normally it would be actually either pushing a button, playing the next thing, or going on the air with the microphone on and saying something. So Andre was supposed to be doing that. At least you thought he was coming back to do that. And here you are, the last commercial is about to end, and you're like, "Where's Andre?" So there you go.
I'm shitting my pants. But Andre, like, as if, I mean, and and I speak to this to you as well. Like you have this inner clock, like you got your groove.
Yeah.
Like you can, if you had an intern working for you, don't tell me you wouldn't fuck with them to that point. And he comes in within seconds, and I'm like, and I'm standing there, and he goes, "Hit the button, Andre Gard," and he's on.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I get it. Like, I would be the same way.
Well, you really think he was hiding in the corner, looking around and waiting, looking at your reaction? And
No. I think
he wasn't doing that.
No, he was just doing what Andre does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, just like what you would do. Like you just like you got your vibe. You got your, and that's the thing that fascinated me about coming into your world. Like, and I am really just blown away by this, because the little I learned when I was there, and when I say little, I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I mean that there is no way that I could ever speak. If anyone asked me what it was like to be a DJ, I couldn't speak on it the way that you could, or the way that Andre could. Like, I mean, the little time that I spent in that world isn't enough to speak on it in a way of authority.
Right. No, I got you.
I was just a dude that was lucky enough to be picked to come in and just go, hey, how you doing? But I find it fascinating how much control and confidence that you have. And I remember coming in because you of all DJs that I've ever worked, and if DJ is the wrong word,
no, it's fine. No,
I worked with you the most. Like I would come in after you, and I remember I would sit out there and listen to your spots,
right?
And I just remember going, what the fuck am I doing here? Like, I don't have that. Like, the confidence that you had, like, the phone calls you would take, the conversations you would have, and the control you had over the time. You had this control over. Like, I don't think people understand.
There is an internal clock. There is an internal clock there's alarms going off every second because there's so many things going on at once. Each one has its own alarm. So you're constantly checking and rechecking and guessing the next thing and all at the same time, having a conversation with two people at the same time, or, having three thoughts at the same time. No, but look, I mean, I appreciate that. That's a very, it's very nice of you, a very great compliment. But not to discredit anything you said, I think there's a lot to be said in that regard for what you do. I mean, I couldn't do what you do. I've been trying to learn how to play guitar since I was 5 years old, and it ain't happening. My fingertips won't allow me, and my fingers aren't long enough to, the fretboard's got to be the thickness of this pen in order for me to play some chords correctly. I don't have the flexibility in my fingers to be able to do it, and I never had. But that aside, just playing the guitar, but just, there is a vibe of a musician. There is a role of a musician when you're in a band, to play. And, it's part of that personality of that role, which you have, that you bring to what you do. So I guess it's the same vibe. If you're not in that space, if you're not living in that world, it's foreign, it's scary. You don't have confidence, so you gain confidence by continuing to be doing that same thing over and over again. And I would probably be right if I said that when you first went on stage in a band in front of a large audience that you were shitting your pants, right? I mean, your confidence.
Oh man, I'll never forget it. Never forget.
When was that?
Large audience?
Set the scene. The first time that you like, oh my God, this is the biggest audience I'm ever playing for in front of.
Oh yeah. I was 17.
Yeah.
I was at the Galaxy in New Jersey.
No kidding. I used to go there all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was at the Galaxy in New Jersey. I was 17.
The Galaxy.
And it's great because I have, after 30 years, I got my rig back. This is the rig I used to use. You can see it there on camera.
So you knew Bill Wolf?
Yeah.
And Wolf Records and his
yep.
His big what kind of dog did he have? He had a husky, right? A big husky?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it was his wife or his girlfriend. I can't remember. It was his wife or his girlfriend. We used to go over to the Starview Diner all the time across the way there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, good guy. Ivory Tower. You remember that band?
Yep. We used to open for them.
Then I saw you play back then.
Okay. Yeah.
We would go see them a lot. Bill wanted us, when I was at PST, not to take it from your story, but Bill wanted us to help promote Ivory Tower's release of their first record. So I'm in the liner notes. I have credit in the liner notes.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's wild. Yeah.
So go ahead. So you're on.
No, we opened for them. We opened for them for about almost a year. But that was, I was 17 years old. They would take me into the club at like 6 o'clock in the evening before the bouncer showed up, because I wouldn't have been allowed in.
Yeah.
And I would sit backstage, with my guitar and do my thing, and then we would go up and play. But I'll never forget the first show. The guitar tech, because the band had a crew.
Yeah.
He had my amp set up, and I'll never forget like hitting that first chord and feeling my hair blow back from the sound, like, oh my God, this is real.
Yeah.
And it was from that moment on, I was like, yeah, this is home to me. This is what I do, but like the first song, like my eyes were closed the whole time because I was sweating so much because I was so nervous. I was like, oh God, like I can't open my eyes because it stings, But when I heard the crowd's reaction, I was like, okay, I got this.
Mm-hmm.
I know I got this.
But so, the fact that your eyes were closed, you had enough confidence that you didn't have to watch your fingers move. You knew.
No. We were so rehearsed.
Yeah, but I'm saying you knew as a performer, as a musician, as a guitar player, that the material that you were going to play that night, that wasn't the issue with your anxiety or your fear. No. That wasn't part of it. You knew you can handle that part. Which a lot of people might not have been able to handle that part. Screw up a chord, screw up a guitar solo, whatever. But you were at a point where you knew that you could just do it with your eyes closed, literally, and not have to.
No, I was just shitting my pants because I'm like, who the fuck are these people? And I've never heard myself this loud in my life.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
the Galaxy wasn't that big either, so loud in there is loud.
No. Yeah. And Rob Leese was the sound guy, and he fell in love with this rig. I can't believe I got this back after 30 years.
Wow.
But he fell in love with the rig, and he used to do this trip with me where he'd be like, hey, I'm going to tarp your cabinet because I love your sound. I love what you do, because I didn't use effects. I plug straight in, it was my guitar straight in.
Yeah.
So he would, but then I was destroying the diaphragms in the microphones because my amplifier would be dimed. It would be full up.
Wow.
And he finally came to me. He's like, dude, I can't afford the microphones anymore. You're destroying my microphones. So let's, So I had to do different things to get my sound. But, it was a great learning experience, And it led me on, the path that I ended up leading on. But like I said to you earlier today, when we were talking earlier, that was, that was around the time that you were getting into radio, 87.
Yes.
So, like you went into radio in 87 and I went to the Galaxy.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And we both were underage.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? Like, we just kind of like find our way,
Right. I mean, again, literally, you probably were there, some of the times that I was there, and who knew? And here we are, all these years later, and we're looking back at moments in our life that were terrifying and important at the same time. And somehow they were connected, my radio beginning and your performing in front of a large crowd with a noisy rig, in a club that at the time was legendary. Even when it was still open, it was legendary. Everybody played the Galaxy, Brittany Fox, Cinderella, I mean, that's where they got their start, and that's where you got your start. Think about it. You're part of that beginning with all these other bands that, again, some people in radio have a farther career than others. And the same thing with music, they became Cinderella and Brittany Fox, and some other radio personalities became, not that these are the people, but John DeBellas of the world and the Pierre Roberts of the world, or the Andre Gardners of the world, they're bigger names and bigger personalities, compared to, where my career went with I'm not, comparing or complaining, but that's just the way it works. Right. I mean, not everybody's going to have that path.
You've done something very important as well, as that you're also teaching. So would you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So
you're doing this really cool thing with the teaching thing.
I've been instructing, I guess teaching, instructing, mentoring at the Connecticut School of Broadcasting, which is now called the CSB Media Center. That's gone through a lot of changes over the years. I've been there since '05.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's been a while. It's been a nice run with them. They're great people, and it's a great opportunity for me to, to kind of go full circle and kind of show the ropes to the bench, if you will, the minor leaguers that are going to continue in this industry, not just so much radio, but digital production, which can be, used for all kinds of things, not just for radio, and also podcasting. Teaching that course as well, a course that I actually created for the Cherry Hill School a couple of years
Wow.
ago
So,
during the pandemic.
you actually wrote the curriculum.
Yeah, for the Cherry Hill campus, not for the whole, not for the whole organization, but Cherry Hill wasn't doing podcasting yet. I was touching on it in my digital production class just because it was something to talk about as a tool to use the digital editor to have content to be able to edit. So talk shows and that kind of thing, pre-recorded talk shows were things that we were kind of really basing it on, but that kind of has morphed into, podcasting, the spoken word podcast. So I started a podcast myself in 2019. So as I was diving headfirst into into that area, I decided, why don't I take what I learned from various sources and best practices and put it together and teach, teach at the school. So I submitted it and they loved it, and did the first year virtually because of the pandemic. So I taught that, on Zoom from my home studio, which was interesting. And now I'm doing it in person, day classes and night classes. But, I wanted to give back. Like that school, the way that school is set up was kind of how I learned. I didn't go to Connecticut School of Broadcasting. I went to a school that was similar to it in the way they approached the curriculum and the way they approached the hand-on experience, being very hands-on with the equipment and learning by people who were in the business. The instructors at the time at the school that I went to were also from the radio world up in North Jersey. It was a school in Elizabeth. And there is a connection to Connecticut School of Broadcasting to this school because one of the guys that used to work with Dick Robinson, the owner of Connecticut School of Broadcasting, decided he can open up his own schools. He wanted to be, his own dude. And this school was the start of that. It didn't go very far. There was only 2 or 3 classes, so about a year and a half in its existence. We were the first class, and a good percentage of us got jobs. So it wasn't a failure in terms of in terms of our experience there going through the program. But he couldn't sustain recruitment for continuing, and Connecticut School of Broadcasting was just eating him alive. So that being said, I wanted to teach new recruits, new potential, stars the same way. And that's what, CSB, how they do it. So I started there in '05 and I teach studio operations, which is basically radio, automation, studio, running the board, playing CDs and that kind of thing, talking in the microphone, being an air personality, understanding timing. We talked a little bit about having a clock in the background in your head, developing that clock. So, there's stuff always having to happen and how you react to certain things. I mean, when Andre was coming back from those commercials, you had to react. What do I do? How do I go forward? What am I supposed to say? Teaching them exactly those solutions for those moments and others in that class. And then digital audio production is basically teaching them how to use Adobe Audition, the basics, not getting really into it to a point where they master Adobe Audition, because that's almost impossible. That program is just an amazing program, in its own right. There's so many things that you can do with it, but in terms of digital audio and editing, multi-track and those kinds of things, just simplicity, simple stuff, just getting them acclimated with that so they can use it in the field of radio, in the field of anything that has to do with audio production. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the industry of radio. It could be, any kind of industry that uses audio for a tool to communicate with their staff or their clients. And podcasting, getting them involved in the podcasting world and showing them best practices to get their feet on the ground with it and take it to the next level. And of course, everybody wants to be the next Joe Rogan in that class. Which I find to be very interesting, because when I first started teaching radio ops, studio operations, everybody wanted to be Howard Stern. So it all comes back to who's doing it the best and being the best success, having the best success, that they aspire to be that. And there's nothing wrong with that dream, But for most people, it's going to turn into a nightmare because only a few chosen people in this world are going to be picked to be that person in that industry. And it takes a lot of luck and some talent for that to happen. And to remember that Joe Rogan was a brand before he was a podcaster.
Yeah,
He did all kinds of stuff. So if he jumped off the Ben Franklin Bridge tomorrow, all his followers would follow, so whatever he does, he's going to be successful. And that's not a slight on Joe Rogan. That's just the way it is. And that's just how brands work. You and I were talking about that earlier today about brands, and that's one of the things.
And I was fascinated by your insight into that too.
Yeah.
I found that, you know what? And I got to tell you that it was just that one conversation that we had earlier today.
Yeah.
And I want to touch on it, without keeping you up all night, but I want to touch on it a little bit. Because it was really enlightening, because a brand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I walked away from our conversation this morning. Because I do that. I think on things once I have a conversation. I was like, that's a commitment, right? Like you're making this commitment, right? You were talking about like whether it's Beasley, whether it's Walmart, whether it's a restaurant.
Right.
There's a commitment to the brand.
Well, not just a commitment to the brand, but a commitment to yourself as a brand. Right?
As a brand, right.
Yeah, as a brand. So, as in this business and, all these reality shows, these, singing shows, American Idol and The Voice and You Think You Can Dance, all these shows have revealed how cutthroat it is to get into the entertainment industry, whatever it is, whether it's a singer, dancer, air personality, actor, guitar player, whatever the case, it's cutthroat. And your window of opportunity is very, very small. And like I said before, when we were talking about, those who have made it bigger than perhaps maybe you and I in our fields, is because it only happens to a few chosen people for whatever the reason. And you've got to be okay with that. And there's nothing you can do about that. And hopefully on some level, you reach that pinnacle. It might not be the highest pinnacle, but you reach a pinnacle that you're okay with to say, you know what, my definition of success is right where I'm at right now. And that's what you should need to aspire to, is to reach that level of success that you're comfortable with. And try not to compare it with somebody else's level of success, because we're all different. But in that regard, in that vein, also consider yourself as a brand, because when those disappointments do come down the pike, and they will happen in life and in this industry, you're not going to be picked. You're going to be embarrassed, not by somebody else, but by yourself, because we're our worst enemy when it comes to critiquing what we do for ourselves. Right. So you're going to embarrass, you're going to feel embarrassed. You're going to feel like you're a loser. You're going to feel like you don't matter. You're going to feel like you're shit because you didn't get what you worked so hard to prepare for. And that moment came, and for whatever reason, it might not even been your control. And maybe it was, doesn't matter. It didn't happen. If you consider yourself as a brand going into that journey, those disappointments are going to be less rigid, less sharp, because you're not going to attach the emotional part of it as much as you would if you didn't look at it that way.
That's what I love. That's what I love about what you said.
Yeah, and I use examples,
but what you really, I mean, and we'll get to your examples.
Yeah.
You're encompassing yourself, like you're saying, okay, that didn't work,
right?
But that doesn't delineate where I'm going.
No, you've got to fail to succeed. You can't succeed unless you fail. You got to make mistakes. You got to correct those mistakes. That's how you learn. I mean, from the youngest age of going to school, you didn't know what 1 + 1 was automatically. You had to learn that. And there were many times where you thought it was 5 and you were wrong, and you had to learn that it was 2.
I still think it's 5. But go ahead. Sorry. Good. But I follow you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, you got to learn. It becomes more of an issue because we get older and we learn more about ourselves, and we're aware about ourselves. We're aware about, caring and giving a shit what somebody else thinks about you, and peer pressure and all this other stuff that plays into it. that we've got to, try and put that stuff aside and focus on what we're trying to do and understand that you're not going to get everything you want. You can't always get what you want, but sometimes you get what you need, right? Great lyric.
Oh, here we go. You know what?
Great lyric, but
I'd get a copyright strike if I played it.
It's life, and getting to my examples, right? So we talked about this morning. And again, I use this in my lectures at class. There's Coke and there's Pepsi. Yep. There's Home Depot and there's Lowe's. There's McDonald's.
I love these analogies.
Right. There's Mac and there's PC. There's iPhone and there's Android. There's a yin and a yang. It doesn't make one product better than the other. There might be some debate that says, yes, there are better than the other, depending on which side you're on, but I digress. The point is, there's a group of people that love one over the other, and that same group on the opposite side loves that brand better than the other on the other side. So there's always going to be that division, and it's called competition, and it's healthy, right, to a point. So when you go to a restaurant, and you say, hey, what would you like to drink, sir? The waitress or waiter server comes over and says, what would you like to drink, sir? Oh, I'll have a Coke. Oh, we only have Pepsi. Is that okay? Are you going to throw a fit? You're going to be like, no, that's fine. But think about the next time that happens. Why is this restaurant only serving Pepsi? Who knows? Maybe they get a better deal with the distributor. But the point is, they chose Pepsi. Doesn't mean Coke sucks. And the other restaurant down the street might serve Coke and not Pepsi. Doesn't mean Pepsi sucks. Just means they've chosen that in the moment. And when you're performing and trying to get something, trying to land something, if you don't match what they are looking for in their head, on paper, the design of the character that they've created, if you don't fit the bill, they're not going to choose you. It doesn't mean what you did was horrible and what you are is horrible. It just means you did not fit the bill.
I think
so. Take your lumps and go home.
No. I mean, yeah. At the end of the day, yes.
Yeah.
What you're saying, but I don't think that the way you present that is not heard enough.
No, it isn't.
It's not. And I'm speaking to my audience as musicians, as artists. It's not heard enough. Like, I don't think they understand. And I didn't understand it.
Right.
Until you hit me with it today. Like, to go, you know what? It's okay to have my brand.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I think there's that I think this is one of the things that really fascinates me about our conversation this morning was that, hey, not everybody has to like what I do.
No.
Like, it's okay to have a brand.
Right.
And go, this is what I do. You don't have to like it.
Right.
Because across the street, you can go get Coke. I'm Pepsi, and it's okay.
Nobody can be you. Right. So with the podcast world, like, a lot of people are anxious and gun shy to get into a podcast situation because of the Joe Rogans of the world. And like, how am I going to compete with that? It's not about competing with that. It's about doing something that you believe in, that you can deliver, that nobody else can. And that's the same with, being a style of guitar player. Your influence are all part of how you play guitar, but you've harnessed that all, and through that funnel that you call your brain and your reflexes from your brain to your hands, and you create based on your influences how you interpret it and how you want it to sound for you. And that's your brand, and you develop that, and you continue to harness that and get better at it, and maybe bring other factors into it as time goes by that you're influenced by, that continue to build that brand. But nobody else can be you. They can try to imitate you. Imitation is the best form of flattery, so let them try to imitate you. But never, if I could quote another lyric from another musician, don't go changing to try to please me. I mean,
don't go change. Yeah. Oh man, we get so many copyright strikes.
But you know what? Look, truth be told, though, Chris, it's easier said than done. I mean, come on. We all have woe is me moments. We all do. We all look in the mirror and say, "What the hell did I do?" Moments. It's human. But at the end of the day, before you close your eyes, before you go to sleep at night, and you look back on whatever it is that's bothering you to keep you up at night, you've got to be confident in your space and say, you know what? I did my best. I'm who I am, and I'm going to continue to be who I am, because eventually it's going to pay off. Eventually it's going to match what somebody else is looking for. It will happen.
No, I'm with you on this. I'm completely with you on this. And my next question is, do you manifest that? Like when you decided to get, I think you did.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go that far to say you did because
Yeah.
you're going to sleep at night to radio shows as a young kid.
Yeah.
So it got into your subconscious, and then you got into that vibe, and you manifested your success, you manifested your talent, right? The same way I did, as a kid, I was going to sleep. I had the big headphones on with the curly cable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I had
into
the one white earpiece from Radio Shack, you
yeah,
remember those, the
yeah,
original
yeah.
earbuds. Yeah.
And I was listening to all my favorite bands. And,
Yeah.
that's how I got all my licks going, right? I got because I manifested it, right?
Yeah. You were learning those riffs from your heroes and
Right.
saying, wow, I want to be one of those guys or
Yeah.
gals, as the case may have been. So how do I do that? You harness all that influence, and you try different things with it. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but you created a sound for yourself.
But yeah, at the end of the day, whether it was an aesthetic or a sound or your trajectory into
Yeah.
your world, there was a manifestation, right? You manifested it.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, 1987,
Mhm.
doing an overnight shift, like you were doing it, right? And you've continued to do it. So do you still manifest visions for
Oh
yourself?
God. Yeah. I'm not
Do
done
you?
yet. Yeah. No,
No, I know you're not done
no,
yet,
I mean,
but
in the sense that I'm not done dreaming. I'm not done reaching for the stars. Like I'm not comfortable that I've come this far into the career and I can coast until it's done. No, there's more that I want to do. There's more opportunities that I want to be able to, put myself in. I know there's going to be more situations where I'm going to be disappointed. But that's fine. I know that going into it. And if you know that going into it, again, it makes it less evil. It makes it less,
no, I think you know what? I've never heard that before.
yeah.
I've never heard someone say, "I'm going in and I'm ready for the disappointments."
And some people would say, "Oh, that's negative thinking." I
No, I'm
disagree.
not. But the way you said it,
Yeah.
I don't hear it that way.
But
I
some
hear it
people
as a
would
guy like,
interpret that though.
I'm putting on the fucking armor, man.
Yeah. Well,
I'm ready for the shit show.
but see, the difference though is you've got the scars to know what armor to put on. And that's the difference now than when
Yeah.
1987 was around and you and I were just starting out doing our thing. We didn't know what the armor that we needed to protect ourselves for those disappointments. But, over time, you figure it out and you realize it. Now you still get surprised every now and again by something, curveball that hits you. You didn't see it coming, but you get it. You understand, no, first of all, you understand the business, right? You understand the ins and out of the business. You understand what it takes. You understand, you can almost have that intuition that something good or bad is going to happen just by how the steps are being built in front of you, right?
Okay.
But if you're not aware of it happening for the first time, you're not even going to recognize that it's there. So, all that experience, all those failures, all those times where you failed have made you a better person. So when those other times come, you're prepared for them. It doesn't mean you're going to be successful more. It just means that you're going to feel better about it. But they're going to come. And again, it's not, as I said, you agreed. Some people can look at that as, well, that's negative thinking. Go into it with a positive thought that you're going to get this. Of course, I go into it with a positive thought that I'm going to get this. But, if anybody thinks that just because you think positive, that every single time you think positive, the positive outcome is going to happen, you're freaking crazy. It doesn't work that way. That's not how life works. So understanding that, you go into it with a positive mindset, but with the understanding that, yeah, it's probably going to be a disappointment, and that's okay because I'm ready for it. But if it's not a disappointment, then it makes it that much sweeter.
Well, yeah, it's almost like, you know, our dreams are offense,
Hmm.
but then you learn defense.
That's a
Like,
great way to put it.
you
Yeah.
know what? Shit shows happen,
Yes, they
and
do.
I got to learn to duck.
Duck and
You know,
dodge and weave. Yeah. Yeah.
duck and weave. You know, because
Yeah.
it happens. And I want to dovetail that into one thing I want to talk about before we wrap up is your podcast. Like
Oh.
you've been really killing it
Oh, thanks, man.
with this podcast, and you know what? I want to thank you because you taught me in just one phone conversation. You taught me so much in terms of how to, you know, present. So I'd like you to talk about your show.
Well, I appreciate the compliment. That's very nice of you. You're doing, you're doing a great job of what you're doing with this podcast. A lot of the musicians that you have on, the stories that they tell are something else.
Oh, you saw the Jimmy Bruno show?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So congratulations. Yeah. Yeah. So this podcast that I kind of came up with, and then I incorporated a friend of mine, Paul Kelly, who's also a radio guy that I've known for a long time, to be part of it. It's called Aircheck, and Aircheck is a term that radio uses um, twofold. It's a way. It's a term used to document a radio show. So you create an air check of your show. So every time you do a radio show, you record it, and that's considered an air check. And then there's something called an air check session. And when it's used as a verb, it's when your boss, the program director, station manager, a role that we talked about before, sits with the air talent and listens to pieces of the show from that air check cassette just to see what you're doing, making sure you're doing all the right things, and if there's anything that you need to maybe change your way or you change your path, or maybe just get that reinforcement that you're doing everything right. That should be something that a program director is doing with their staff. It doesn't happen as often as it used to anymore. But because of the terminology and the type of podcast that it is, which is basically Paul and I interviewing radio personalities, and the subtitle of the podcast is Aircheck, a podcast about radio's personality from radio personality. So it's talking to radio personalities, owners, program directors, consultants in radio about the business, about specific things that might have happened during their career that were fun, that were embarrassing, that were exciting. Talk about where you were when. So, when, if it's somebody who's been in the business for a while, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, Martin Luther King was assassinated, when John Lennon was assassinated,
remembering where you were.
Yeah, remembering where you were at these moments, because that's part of pop culture, and radio played a big role in those events. So, not just those events, the sad stories, but the happy stories too, about backstage encounters with rock stars, or on the air interviews, or promotions and contests that went awry or that were fun. And the good thing is, if this guest that we speak to has audio of those particular moments from their air check collection over the years, then we tap into that and play that to accompany the story. So it kind of gives it life.
Shit.
Yeah. So that's what we've been doing. We're in between seasons right now. We just finished season 4 back in June. And so it's been a while since we put a season together, but we're looking at doing something this spring into the summer. But our roster is, pretty cool. Our very first interview was Nina Blackwood from MTV.
Yeah, that was awesome. I listened to that. It was such a great show.
For her to recap, that night, talk about where were you when? Well, she was there because she was part of it when MTV launched, and she tells that whole story. A couple of Philadelphia people on the radio, Cousin Ed, who was a coworker from YSP with me. We interviewed him because he's been a part of so many events through his career that I was also a part of with him that were fun to kind of recap, and we had the audio to prove it. Some Sirius XM guys, Keith Roth and Eddie Trunk. I worked with Eddie also in New York when I was at
Q. Oh,
Q.
really? Eddie Trunk. Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. We had Danny Bonaducci from Partridge Family fame. He was on. He's a morning show guy out in Seattle radio right now. Yeah. Kid Chris, who was syndicated morning show, had been on the Howard Stern show a bunch of times. A couple of consultants, Fred Jacobs being one of them. He's like the consultant in the radio industry.
Wow.
the owner of Forever Media, Kirby Confer, who, when he was a DJ, he brought the Beatles on stage in their very first appearance in America when after they landed in New York. They played Baltimore before. I think it was actually I misspoke. When they came to America in February, actually 59 years ago this week, it was that September when they came back that they played Baltimore, and he brought them up on stage. And he tells a story about that, which was great.
You heard this from Rich the Sisto.
Yeah. And a guy out of Rochester who was a radio DJ up in that market, for 40 years, just retired last year. Kano was his nickname, Dan Kane. So we interviewed him. Greg Steele, who was a pretty prominent program director through the 90s, and he was with MTV for a little while with Sirius Satellite Radio as well. Bobby Silver, who was a record promoter, who doesn't admit it 100%, but she thinks that the character in This Is Spinal Tap, the record rep, played by Fran Drescher.
Yeah.
That part was based on her life. Like, she was that.
No way.
Yeah. So she thinks that was the case. She hasn't received her check yet, but she tells the story that she thinks that her, because
you have a woman on her knees smelling a glove, and you don't find that offensive?
Exactly.
I thought it was sexy.
She was the Lenny and Squiggy, the guys that played Lenny and Squiggy. She was their record rep when they went out and toured. So they were doing the movie around the same time. So that's where she thinks that came from. Yeah. Buzz Knight, who was a radio executive with Greater Media for a long time when I worked with them at Ben FM and before MGK was bought by Beasley. So he's on. Greg O'Brien, who's a voiceover artist, a friend of ours. He's actually the voice of our podcast. He does all the announcing part. The OB is his nickname. We did an interview with this guy, Barry Scott, that does a syndicated show called The Lost 45s. Steve Craig, who was part of the historic 99X out of Atlanta. Brian Kelsey, who was also on the Howard Stern show. He was the Howard Stern voice for a while. And then Jimmy Fink, legendary Jimmy Fink from WPLJ in the early 70s, WXRK, K-Rock in New York. So we got a lot of interesting people telling us their radio stories, through the last 3 years, or actually from their careers, the last 50 years, at least the last 50 years. And, back in the day when radio is different now than it was then. You asked me earlier in this conversation about, whether either it was this conversation or this morning, I don't remember which one it was, whether or not, the freeform part of radio, when that changed, that was this morning, right? Yeah. Yep. And back in the 70s, the late 60s, early 70s, it was still happening. In fact, PLJ FM was the birth child of freeform FM radio before things changed. So, hearing those stories from Jimmy Fink when he was a part of that was pretty cool. And then all the influences, Brian Kelsey and Greg O'Brien and Buzz Knight, they're all from the New York area. So for them to talk about, WMCA guys, those jocks from the 60s, WABC guys before I started listening to the Yankee games, just hearing that old school radio, those radio stories and how radio was and being an on-air disc jockey at the time and what that meant for that time period. Was cool, and if you like history, if you like, the history of anything and you're into radio, those episodes will be fun to listen to. And then it's cool because they have the audio. We have the audio to back up, the referencing of the different stories that they talk about, which brings it to life, which is what I think makes the podcast. But we've been doing it for a couple of years, and it's been a lot of fun, and it's been something that has helped, with my teachings, as I said, putting together that curriculum for CSB. And it's also an opportunity for me in my next semester. I think I'm going to get the students involved with it and turn it into some sort of workshop or something so they can be part of a podcast, a real podcast.
So what would you say, and I don't want you to give away the secrets, but what would you say is what makes a great interviewer? Because clearly you are that guy. Like, what is the key to being a great interviewer?
Well, in terms of a podcast or just an interviewer in general?
in general, like, you know, whether it's a podcast, whether
because
it's
not every
radio.
podcast is an interview style. You know, podcasts come in all different shapes and sizes.
Yeah, I mean, like this one, we're just kind
Ours is,
of
right, exactly. But it's an interview, right? You're interviewing me,
yeah,
you know, and it's kind of the same relaxed kind of vibe that
right.
our interviews, Paul and I have with our guests as well. So it's along the same lines. The biggest thing I ever learned is being an interview, and just in general, is the interviewer better always know the answer to the question they ask before they ask it.
Okay, stop. We explain that.
Never ask a question that you don't think you know the answer to, so you won't be surprised by the answer. So do your research, know a little
Okay,
bit
well,
more.
okay,
I mean,
okay,
like if you're going to ask somebody, you know, especially if it's a question that might be controversial, you know, they might have an opinion about something. You better know what their opinion is before you ask them, because if they answer it in a foreign way, you're not going to know how to follow that up, and you're going to feel like you're stuck, you know, because you want to have that confidence with everything that you do, you know, whether you're on stage or being or interviewing somebody for a podcast or something, you know, other than a pre-recorded thing. If it's a live moment where you're on stage with somebody, and you've got a live audience and you're interviewing somebody, you don't want to feel like, okay, I don't know where to go now. You know, you always want to know where to go.
Okay, I understand that.
Yeah. So always know the answer to the questions that you're asking, because that
basically. But I didn't know any of the answers to the questions I asked you. That's what I'm asking. It's like,
well, that's flying without a net. I mean, that is flying without a net.
I'm because I'm interested in you.
Right, but
I'm interested in where you came from.
However, but what you did earlier today is you don't even realize it. Subliminally, you were finding answers to the questions you were going to ask me when we started this podcast earlier today. So you did a pre-interview. So you got a roundabout idea of where we were going to go, what we were going to talk about, and you knew kind of where I was going to answer and where I was going to lead you, so you can continue moving on from whatever crossroads you thought you were at and you needed to go a different way. Not knowing that, and then just coming into it blind, so to speak, that's a little dangerous, because, if you don't have the convenience of doing edits to make it look like that didn't happen, and you're doing it live and on the fly, it might not come across as I
get that. I get that.
Yeah,
I understand that.
So, but that's a rule that I always have is do enough research, do enough pre-interview, do enough conversation with your guests before you go live, so to speak, to get an idea of where they're going to go with the question or the line of questioning that you're going to ask them. Rather than just doing it for the first time off the cuff, it's just not a safe place to be, especially if you don't know who they are. Like if it's just, if you're interviewing somebody just because it's your job and you got to interview this person, and you're just doing the research just because you need to know what questions to ask, have a little bit more interest in it and know what those answers are going to be, or at least a roundabout idea, so you can have a conversation. Because to me, an interview isn't a question answer session. A good interview is a conversation. And one of the pet peeves I have in radio is when somebody says, "Oh, I've got an interview later with, Robert Plant." That makes it sound cheap. That makes it sound unprofessional. That makes it sound unreal. I would rephrase it and say, "Hey, I'm going to be speaking with Robert Plant later. You got to check in and hear our conversation." That comes across much better, and it also makes you seem like you know Robert Plant, and you're not just some outsider asking him questions because you got an opportunity to talk to him, and that's the kind of trust and engagement and connection that you form with your audience. And even if it's not true, so what? You want to build on your brand, right? So that's part of the branding building, is that you want to make it look like, or give your audience an indication that you're the shit. You're talking to Robert Plant. You're not interviewing Robert Plant. You're talking to Robert Plant, so two different things.
I call it the hang.
Or the hang, right? Something that's
which is what I'm going to call this show. I'm doing the hang with Richard Sisto.
Perfect. So it doesn't have to be so formal.
All 10 foot of it.
Yeah, like we've known each other for a long enough time now where this is a conversation. It's you and I drinking a beer or
well, I mean, that's the entire point of why I do this.
Yeah.
I'm actually doing this, and this can be off record, but I want to make this very clear. I do this to learn.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong.
I'm more interested in learning from the people I speak with. You know, I'm not doing this to, you know, for any other reason. I need to learn the humanity. I
Right.
need to learn
What
from
I'm
people
saying,
that, you know,
what I'm saying is plan spontaneity, right? You want to learn, so you want to sometimes being surprised by something is part of the learning process, right? You're like, sometimes if it's a bad surprise, even though it's a learning experience, it's not kind of the way you wanted it to go down. So, you know, with anything that you put out for the public to see as a performer, you've planned for it. You've practiced, right? You didn't just jump on stage and do it for the very first time. Maybe there was 1 or 2 times that happened, but for the most part, you planned it. You planned it. You had some work up to that moment. And in radio or even in entertainment, there's a level, depending on what you're doing, of planned spontaneity. Your goal is to make it seem like it came out of left field, but that's for the goal of the audience to look at it and say, oh, this guy's good. But don't let them peek behind the curtain and see the real man controlling Oz, right? You are controlling what you do before you do it. And the key is to present it as if that's not happening. That's what a good entertainer and a good interviewer does, is make it seem easy. But it's not. I mean, any radio show that you laugh at, you know, whether it's one in Philadelphia or anywhere else, that stuff might sound like it was spontaneous. Some of it is because it's an offshoot of what they planned, and sometimes there's spontaneous reactions to things. But for the most part, they're all planned. They know where they're going to go and what they're going to say. Not maybe to the word, but they have an idea. Okay, we're going to do this bit. We're going to go there, and then we're going to go here after that. Okay, go with it. And then some spontaneous reaction happens, or a laugh, or you know, somebody says something that maybe takes it in a different direction, but they try to circle it back to whatever it is they're planning. But planned spontaneity is key, because you always know where you're going. You always have a roadmap, and not having a roadmap is dangerous. Very dangerous.
Holy shit. I'm dangerous.
You have a set list, right?
No.
You don't have a set list. You don't have a set list of what songs you're going to play.
Nope.
So you finish a song, you look at each other like, all right, let's do this now.
Yep.
But you've had some sense of playing whatever that is that you decided to play.
Yeah, no, we have a sense of self.
Right. And you have that chemistry that when you do start that song, you know what part you play in that song.
Yep.
Yes. If you didn't know that, it would be a disaster.
Oh yeah, no, it would be a shit show.
Yeah, but that's the point I'm making. It might not be.
I know. I understand where you're going.
Yeah,
but I mean, it was just kind of like the way you kind of brought that down. I was like sitting there going, "Oh shit."
No, I mean, look, that there's a lot of validity to that philosophy, you know, and
no, and I agree with it. I think that there is a beauty in controlled chaos.
That's another way to put it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, so to the audience, you're like, "Oh my god, that was perfect." I was like, "Oh yeah, no, that was completely planned."
Yeah, but you don't let in on that.
No, you don't let in on it. And a lot of times, in my experience, especially as a live performer, we weren't in on it either. It was like, just holy fuck, that's not going to happen again. Like, we just, you know, lightning in a bottle. Like, we had light, you know.
Yeah, let's take it into a different metaphor. So, how many times have you broken a guitar string in the middle of a song?
There's been a few times.
Yeah, I'm sure. Right.
Yeah.
And maybe the reaction to that with yourself might be different from your bandmate that saw it happen and screwed up his timing because you didn't play the note right or whatever. And he was focusing on you being, you know, the catalyst of the rhythm of the song or whatever the case. Like, you created a problem for him or for her, but you broke the guitar string.
You're going to hate me for this.
Hold on a second. Let me finish my thought.
Go ahead.
So you break the string, or you ran out of picks, or your drummer broke a stick and is trying to reach for one. He can't, and he's playing a damn shitty ass drum beat now because he only has one stick and a foot pedal.
I love this scenario.
Right? So who's pissed off at that mistake? Band members and maybe the people in the first 4 or 5 rows that saw it happen. But everybody in the back, they don't know what happened until you stop and say, "Oh, wait a minute. We got to stop. Oh, everybody's like, "Oh, why you got to stop?" I can't find my drumstick. I need to get more drums. Tech, can you bring me drumsticks? So now you told everybody in the audience that you made
right.
this,
You
right?
projected it, right?
Yes.
I got what you're saying. No,
Yeah,
no, I'm with you. I'm with you.
Yeah. But you never break a string.
Never happened on my watch.
Yeah, you're perfect. You never break.
No, I'm not. No, as a matter of fact, right before the pandemic, there's a video of me playing a song on, and I busted a string. No one knew it because there was a drum solo, thankfully, and I went and grabbed the other guitar.
Yeah,
but no, what you're saying is absolutely, perfect, because what you're saying is the gig of a professional is to create the illusion that everything's okay.
Yes.
When it's rarely ever okay.
No, it's a shit show.
It's a shit show.
And
you're doing your thing. And I remember that specifically, not specifically on your show, but I remember like just the way. No.
I must be presenting it in a way that there's no oozing of shit around the corners, but there's been some shit shows. Definitely. No doubt about it.
Okay, so to that point, like no one knows that.
Well, I don't know. Nobody's told me, but I'm not sure that I was the only one that knew.
But you're in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Right? Because I mean, like, here's the thing. The other thing to the audience is that when you're in the studio doing your show, you're alone. This isn't the old days where there was an engineer.
Or somebody running your board for you, like Andre tried to have you do.
Right. There's no one doing that. It's all you. No, you're alone.
Yeah, for the most part. Some talk shows have a guy or a girl running the board.
And but I mean, at the end of the day, it's So
so
if you're having a bad day, it's your bad day.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, look, I
don't think I'm wrong in that.
No, I can tell you stories where in my overnight days that I was in a huge argument with my girlfriend at the time, and we'd be on the phone. We'd be on the phone. Yeah, we'd be on the phone, like just going at it, just every F-bomb in the world. And I was like, my song's ending. Hold on. Put the phone down and be, hey, I'm a DJ and everything's fine. Here's the next song. Turn the mic off.
You know what?
Right, that bitch, blah, 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 blah,
That's such a TikTok thing, right? Journey, open arms, enjoy.
Yeah.
What the fuck are you talking about?
That's right.
I swear to God, I wasn't. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I wasn't
exactly
there.
Right.
Thank you for listening. We'll be back after these. You know what I mean? Like, like that kind of like you almost have to become two different people.
You do, because nobody cares about what's going on in your world. They expect you to be the performer or the personality that they have attached themselves to, and they don't care whether your debit card got stolen, or you got a flat tire on the way to work, or you broke up with your girlfriend. I mean, look, if you want to incorporate that stuff into the storyline of what you're talking about, then that's different. But for the most part, if you're on a radio show playing music, nobody cares about that. They want, you're entertaining their bad day, that they broke up with their girlfriend and they got their flat tire and they had their ATM card stolen, so you're trying to help them get through that. They don't care about your problems, but the same thing for you as a guitar player. You could have the shittiest day going into the gig, but as soon as you get on stage, you've got to be that.
I fucking kill it, motherfucker.
You got to be that same guy.
Yeah. No, I'm 10-foot cock all the way.
And and that goes to some of the stories of meeting your heroes. Everybody has a bad day, and if part of the job is that you need to meet with your fans because this was planned, and this is the worst day of the tour for you, you've got to put on a happy face. And there's a lot of times where I've met musicians where they were dicks. They were not what I thought they were going to be, and in the moment I'm like, fuck you, in my head. But then as I thought about it, I'm like, you know what? maybe something's going on. I can't make it about me. Maybe they're having a shitty day. Maybe something's going on in their world. They're on tour. Maybe their family's in chaos, and they're just not feeling it. So got to give them a hall pass on that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because you don't know. You don't know. You don't know what's going on at home.
No.
Maybe Steve Vai's wife called him and said, hey, look, she ain't going good.
But I can't. I don't think that way when I'm driving, though.
No, I got you. No, I got it.
That doesn't cure road rage. No, not at all. No. I'm from.
But I know that I remember doing. I was at a restaurant on the last tour I did, and I get this call. I get this email, and I'm like, oh, this is a downer, and I'm like, but I'm in the middle of this, like, great dinner with interviews and everything like that, and I'm like, I gotta, but I had to put it aside. It's tough. Yeah. I get it. Like, you have to kind of put it over here and go, okay, I'll deal with that tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Because like at the time, you don't even believe there's a tomorrow morning. You're like, oh my God, I got to address this now. But it's like, no, okay. The clock ticks. We move till tomorrow morning.
Well, it's hard to put things aside depending on how intense they are. That's hard.
But you clearly do that in your profession, and that's why I wanted to ask you about that. Like,
I don't do it successfully all the time, so
what makes a great interviewer?
That's it. That's really it. Know what it is you're going to ask and have an idea of what they're going to answer with.
And that's heavy, man. I never knew that. Like, know the answer.
Well, I don't mean know it exactly to word for word, but have an idea of where they're going to go with it and listen to the answer. That's another thing. Arsenio Hall, I don't know if you remember his late.
Oh, yeah.
But he would never listen to the answers to his questions from his guest. He would sit there on the edge of his seat there, and with his, like, leaning in, and all right, so here's my question, blah blah blah, and then the guest would answer, and he'd be like, yeah. Next question, here it is, blah 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 blah. Here's your answer. He'd be like, yeah, and he would look at the crowd as they were talking, and I'm saying to myself, he doesn't give a crap what they're answering. He just can't wait for them to finish their answer so we can ask the next question to move the show along. Like, and maybe that's just the way he presented himself, and I was wrong in the way he was receiving the answers, but that just made me feel like, wow, he doesn't care about what he's talking about, or he doesn't want to care about what he's talking about. And it was just a strange dynamic. And I don't know if that was, part of the demise of his show, but you got to be engaged. You got to feel and show and have some, sense of connection to whatever it is you're talking about. And don't just worry about, I got to ask the next question, because they might have answered your next question in that answer as well. And then here you are asking the question that they just gave you,
Yeah.
So you want to check it off like, they just answered two questions at once there. I don't want to ask them that. I'm going to sound like a fool. So, but you wouldn't have known that unless you listened intently to how they answered your question. So listening is an important part of being a good interviewer too.
So how, two more on this is, when you target the people you want to talk with, interview, there's an interest, right? Like, do you target, like, I want this person on the show?
It's knowing your audience, right? So number one thing with any performer is who your audience is. So based on who we are trying to target this podcast to, and that would be number one, people in the radio business that kind of can live vicariously through other people's stories that they've had encounters with as well, but with different people. And a lot of the times it's the same process, going backstage after a concert or before a show and waiting and doing the meet and greet, and whether there's food there or not, or you're just sitting in a hallway somewhere. So all those visions come back to everybody who's been through that. And it doesn't matter who the person is they're meeting. It's the same step process to get there. So it's those people listening to those stories and understanding it and being like, okay, yeah, I get that. Yeah, that happened to me with this person. And then there's the people that are not in radio, but want to live vicariously through the experiences of us radio people from those backstage encounters or the interviews or being on the radio, kind of like the way you were looking at it from the outside in when you first started working at MGK. You were doing it and you were, you were interested in it. You were, it was appealing to you, whether it was more because of your dad's, history in radio, or that had a lot to do with it, but you had your own, attraction to it. It's those people too that we're focusing on these stories. So a lot of the things that we ask and the format of how they're presented, I call it not being too inside baseball. What I mean by that is not being so industry, the vernacular not being so industry related that the average person doesn't understand what we're talking about. It has to be a little bit more, to the layman's terms of explaining different things. Like we were just talking about, you mentioned Zeta. Nobody knows what Zeta is. It doesn't know, the automation system and that kind of thing. So that's why I was like, yeah, it's an automation system. This is how it works, blah, blah, blah. So just a little tidbit of how it works so the audience can kind of picture in their mind what you were going through in that moment of despair, as Andre was not.
Of my shit show.
Yeah, of your shit show. So based on that, then you say, okay, here's the set of criteria for why somebody would be on the show. And does this person have stories to tell? Do we know about some of the stories that they have? If not, somebody like a Dave Kano out of Rochester, he's had 40 years on the radio, and he was their Pierre Robert up there. You know what I mean? Like he's that same jock in that community. So
okay, yeah.
So you correlate what Pierre Robert has been through and his, illustrious career and all the different interviews and encounters that he's had. So this guy, Dave Kane's probably had something similar to that. And I'm sure he's got some great stories. So let's talk to him. He just retired. Great time to talk to him. He's nostalgic right now about his career, and he might enjoy the conversation. So, and that's exactly what happened. So we kind of look at that and say, does this guy have something, or does this girl have something to say? And is it going to be intriguing enough? Is it going to be, fun? Is it going to connect to the audience that we're trying to focus on? That's really how we do it. That's really the set of criteria that we set.
And I take a lot of inspiration from that, and I continue to take inspiration from what you said earlier today about know your audience.
Yep.
Be okay with your audience, and understand that you're going to piss some motherfuckers off.
Sure,
it's going to happen.
I have another saying. You want to hear it?
Oh yeah, I'm all ears, man.
Good, bad, or indifferent, as long as they're talking about you, you still matter in the industry, right? If they're talking good about you, if they're talking bad about you, if they could give a shit about you, you're still on the radar. It's still
good. At least I know I'm still on the radar.
You're still on the radar, man. Yeah, good, bad, or indifferent. As long as they're talking about you, you still matter in this business. And that, I mean, it's just basically, again, going back to that confidence thing. It's like, don't worry about the critics. Don't worry about people who have some things not good to say about you or didn't help you move forward to a different position. Don't worry about them. Don't worry about it. It's, you're still in the game, you're still relevant.
I love that. And I think that's really the theme to our conversation tonight. I love that. And I love that the fact that you can say that not only you're relevant, but you're relevant, but you can say, brand yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not Coke. Maybe you're Pepsi.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're not Pepsi. It's okay.
Yeah,
you'll find your space.
But the one thing too that I didn't touch on about the brand that you create is you got to be true to it as well. And,
I agree. No, I agree.
You can't veer off too far off center of what your brand is, and you've got to decide what your brand is before you can understand what is the left or the right side of it. But once you've established what that is, you've got to be true to it, because the audience is expecting. And I'll use another phrase that I live by: deliver on expectations. Your audience is expecting certain things from your brand, and you better deliver on those things. Or otherwise, you're hurting your brand. You're hurting your existence.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
There'll be a test on all this tomorrow, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm waiting for the email. No, I get it. No, I see what you're saying, because you're right. There's a commitment, right?
Big time. Big time.
You have to make that commitment.
You do. And that's
and I'm pausing because that commitment may not bear fruit.
No.
In the initial stages.
Or and certain points down the road, there's going to be hiccups. There's going to be obstacles. It's life. It's
but you stay true to your brand. You stay true to
your brand. Yes. Stay true to your brand.
Because at the end of the day, success or failure, regardless, it's on you, right?
Well, you need to determine what that definition is. What is the definition of your success? What is that? It has to be what works for you.
Right.
And if it becomes a comparison to somebody else, when you're starting to figure that out and it's attainable, then go for it. But if it's not attainable, then you're going to be disappointed many, many, many times, because you're not going to reach that pinnacle, So you got to be realistic. You got to define what success means to you. And that definition will change over time, because as you learn, the craft that you're developing and the brand that you're building, as you learn from those experiences, then you start to realize, okay, you know what? I can be comfortable in my skin if I don't get to the initial plateau, but I get halfway there. That's my goal now, and it doesn't mean you're being unfair to yourself. I think you're being more unfair to yourself if you set your goal too high that is unattainable, because you're going to just continue to work to the bone and never get there.
Right.
And it doesn't mean you didn't work hard enough to try. Everybody puts in work differently and still defines it as the best that they can do. But the value of that work is different from everybody's perspective. It comes out differently. But everybody might say to themselves, I'm doing the best I can. Well, my best I can is different from the best you can in terms of being a third party looking at it from the outside in.
Right. No, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
And also sometimes, like, when you envision, the end game, whatever it is, like, this manifestation.
Yeah.
This is what I'm looking for. Sometimes that manifestation ends up something else, but equally it's beautiful. Like,
true, right?
Oh, I didn't see that happening. But
I didn't see that coming. Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't see that coming. Whatever it is,
right.
whatever crossroads you approached, and you decided, all right, you know what? I'm going to make a left here, and boom, good thing I did that.
Right, but that wouldn't have happened if the initial manifestation wasn't in place. Right?
Because it led you down that original path to find the
right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
That's really the core of what I find fascinating about speaking with you, is that there's a manifestation that leads to these other things, like you were talking about, Wildwood, that led you to these other spaces and continues to lead you to other spaces. And the beautiful thing is that you're teaching that, which to me is the ultimate. I hope that's the ultimate.
I hope it's making a difference in my students' lives. I hope so.
I teach 5 days a week. It makes a difference. I can tell you that. To impart what you know.
Yeah, I look at it. Like I said, I look at it as the bench. The minor leagues. Talent is still so important. Right now, it's going through growing pains. I don't know how to even explain it in a nice way in the radio industry. It's just upside down, but talent is still going to be the one that wins the day. That's still going to be the important factor of radio that wins the day in the long run. And it's still important to, be a content creator and to understand what content to create, to be able to harness that talent and to be able to, build that brand and be recognized. And hopefully, you come out on the other side of the learning process with an opportunity, and hopefully those opportunities are still there. I still truly believe that they will be there. It's just right now, it's radio is in such a weird state because of, technology and AI and just the automobile industry changing and not having, AM, FM radios potentially not being a standard option in a car, which is detrimental to radio because that's where most listening comes from. So, just so many things that radio has as obstacles that it's forcing businesses to cut costs. And unfortunately, the number one thing they cut is talent, and it's disheartening, and it's frustrating. And I hope that something happens with the industry, that it changes that direction, and it shifts the momentum back into the direction of talent, and we'll be ready for it. Hopefully, as an instructor, I'm helping to build dreams and to start and push people into the direction of becoming a talent, and they'll be ready to fill those jobs when they become available. And hopefully, I'll still be doing it when that happens, the next 10, 15 years from now, or whatever it is. Because the age group of the students varies. It's not just kids coming out of high school, not going to college and going to broadcasting school. There's a lot of my students that are our age, that are looking because they weren't happy with the job they had, and they're like, oh, I've always wanted to be on the radio, or I've always wanted to do this, or I always wanted to talk sports. I want to do a podcast. And they feel that, it's an opportunity for them to change their course of direction in their careers. It's a very volatile time to do that. But I'm not the one to tell them that. I'm just there to teach them the ropes and best practices, and hopefully they take the guidance that we offer and turn it into something.
That's great. Yeah, so you're creating the voices of tomorrow.
Yeah.
I know that sounds, like, that's awesome.
I'm gonna write that one down. Add that to my.
I'm creating the voice.
Yeah.
Creating the voices of tomorrow.
Yeah. This has been fun, man. Thanks for having me.
Hey, man, I had a great time with you tonight, man.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you that, whether I keep this on the show, I might edit what I'm about to say out, or I'll post it. I don't give a fuck. I learned a lot from you.
Thank you.
And I learned a lot, not only from trying to follow you at MGK, but I learned a lot from just talking to you earlier today and even tonight. I learned a lot. And you reaffirmed my belief in what I'm doing.
Good.
And I have the deepest gratitude to you for that.
Likewise.
And I really appreciate it, because I believe that you're a guy that believes in what you're doing. And you've reaffirmed my belief to continue to do what I do.
Absolutely.
So I deeply appreciate that.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention about my podcast that your one of your songs is actually the theme song of the podcast. So when you listen, that jam and guitar solo in the beginning and the tail end of each episode, that is you. That is Chris.
That is me wanking off.
Yeah, that's you in your glory. That's you breaking guitar strings, and nobody knows it.
Well,
we got to have you on. I want to hear some of your war stories since the Galaxy. It's been.
Oh man, dude! You know what? I'll keep you two up for a night with those.
However,
stories.
though, I got to challenge you. You got to play the theme song live. You got to play the theme song.
Okay, I have to relearn it. Relearn it.
All right. See, there you go.
Yeah, you see.
There you
go. I got homework.
There you got
Fuck
homework.
me, I got homework. I'd be happy to. I'd be happy to.
No, that'd be fun. That'd be fun. We'd love to have you on.
And I deeply appreciate you featuring my music on your show.
It's great. It's great. It's from the beginning, we wanted something that, that was it was real, and it fit the vibe of everything that we were doing, from, Greg O'Brien, the OB's voice, on top of it, to, Paul and I are rock guys. Obviously you're a rock guy, but some of our guests aren't specifically in the rock format. So, but I think there's something about that song in particular that it doesn't just keep it in the rock genre. It keeps it in the energy genre, if
That's cool.
that's a good way to kind of categorize it, because it just lifts it. It lifts it up and it takes off like a rocket ship. And that's really what we want the energy of the episodes to be. We want it to start and go and get into it. And that song definitely helps guide us do that.
I appreciate that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, thank you.
I'm glad that, and like I said to you before, I got a library of them. If you ever get tired of that one,
that's it, man. Talk about branding. If we change it, we're screwed. No, it's branding. That's it. Yeah, that's it.
That's great.
Every time, as we do at the end of the show. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Rich, thanks again for hanging out with me tonight, man.
Yeah, thank you, man.
It meant a lot to me. And like I said, I've been an admirer of yours since listening to you, and for you to spend the time with me and to just hang out and talk life, it means a lot. So I appreciate that.
No, it's a lot of fun, man. It's a lot of fun. Talking about, when somebody asks to talk about what you do and talk about yourself, you hesitate a little bit, right? But when you talk to somebody who's gone through kind of the same, upbringing in terms of, career goals and being in the thick of it, and then not knowing before that, we could have crossed paths in the beginnings of both of our careers at the Galaxy.
Yeah.
It's true. 6 degrees of separation it really does happen.
It's crazy.
It's
crazy
very
world.
And it's fun to know that. And, I think it just reinforces that, we were both on the right path and we continue to be. So yeah, lots of luck, continued success for what you're doing as well, my friend.
You as well. Thank you.